Good afternoon. I think we'll make a start. My name is Kadambot Siddique. I'm the director of the UWA Institute of Agriculture. On behalf of the University of Western Australia, it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to the UWA Institute of Agriculture's 17th Annual Industry Forum. Before we get started, first some housekeeping. In the unlikely event of any emergency, exits are located at the front of the auditorium on both left and right-hand side of this venue. The washrooms are at the back, so you can exit via this front door and follow the corridor round to the left past the outdoor foyer. It is customary for the University of Western Australia to acknowledge that the university is situated on Noongar land and the Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, beliefs, and knowledge. Although I must ask you to switch off your mobile phones to silent, we want to encourage audience to engage with the industry forum as much as possible, both in person and on social media. If you think of a great question, I invite you to scan the QR code on the screen or at the bottom right hand on the program with you. Our panel facilitator, Belinda Eastough, will then choose her favorites to kick off the discussion later. Of course, rest assured, we will be having a roving microphones during the discussion also. Invited speakers, distinguished guests, UWA colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It's wonderful to see so many people here today who are passionate about the future of agriculture in this wonderful state of ours. I would like to especially acknowledge the Honorable Jarvis MLC, who you will hear from very soon. UWA's Deputy Vice Chancellor Research, Professor Anna Novak is here. Again, Anna, welcome. Former Director General of Department of Agriculture, now called DPIRD, Dr. Graham Robertson. Former Deputy Director General and Manager of Research and Industry Innovation, DPIRD, Dr. Mark Whittingham, our Industry Advisory Board Chair, Dr. Terry Enright, and members Ben Sudlow, Dr. Bruce Mullen, Philip Gardner, Rod Birch, Tress Walmsley, Belinda Eastough, and Dr. Haley Norman. Emerita Professor Lynn Abbott, Emeritus Professor Graham Martin, and again Emeritus Professor Stephen Powles. I also understand that the Honorable Colin D. Gressa, MLA from the National WA, and the Director of the Forest Research Foundation, Professor James Arvanitakis, will be joining us shortly. We are so proud that since we met last year in the same venue, in the academic ranking of world universities for 2022, UWA moved up another position to be ranked as 15th in the world for agriculture. Once again, we retain the #1 position in Australia. This is not very much known. I think this is something we should be proud and celebrate. The UWA Institute of Agriculture has played a significant role in achieving this national and global reputation. The ranking for 2023 is due sometimes in August or September, so we'll know how we rank there again. But an incredible achievement over the last number of years. The UWA Institute of Agriculture was re-established by UWA in 2007 with the mandate to integrate research, education, training, and communication and agriculture related areas across the university and outside the university. That is our clear mandate. Now, the Industry Forum is an annual event that is one of the highlights in our calendar. Over the years, we have explored many topics from new technologies and innovations in agriculture to national and international shifts in the industry. All this information is available on our website. All the presentations and PowerPoints are available. And this is actually led by the Industry Advisory Board. Looking at the huge number of people in this auditorium today, it is clear that this year's topic has struck a chord. I'm very proud that the Industry Advisory Board has put together an excellent program of experts to explore how we can pave the way for the next generation of Western Australian agriculture. Of course, today would not have been possible without the CSBP support and the CSBP fertilizers. We thank them for their long-time support for this forum through CSBP and Farmers Golden Jubilee of Agriculture Science Fellowship held at UWA since 1965. So thank you, Ben. Ben is around. It now gives me immense pleasure to invite the Honorable Jackie Jarvis MLC to formally open the 2023 Industry Forum. Jackie is the Minister for Agriculture and Food, Forestry and Small Business and has been member of the Southwest region in the Legislative Council since 2021. She lives in the beautiful town or countryside of Margaret River and established her electorate office in the town. Prior to entering politics, Jackie started her career in the finance industry before moving to Margaret River in 1998 and establishing a commercial vineyard and winery with her husband Matt. They launched the Jarvis Estate wine brand 2002. I haven't tasted it, but I will buy one soon. Through her work as a farmer, regional businesswoman, in the public service, Jackie has a long career advocating for communities in the bush. She has proved herself as a strong leader through her work as a CEO of WA Rural, Regional and Remote Women's Network. During her time as a commissioner for the Products Commission and on the boards of Southwest Development Commission and Australian Land Care Council. Jackie's work attracting resettled refugees to work in agriculture saw her named 2014 WA Rural Woman of the Year and National Runner-Up. She was also named the Rural Community Leader of the Year at the 2019 Australian Farmer of the Year Awards. Jackie was appointed as the Minister for Agriculture and Food, Forestry and Small Business in December 2022 and is passionate about continuing to provide a strong voice for the regional communities in Western Australia. I gather that she said during the last reshuffle, she said, I want to stay in agriculture. And the Premier definitely allowed her, and that's really good for the industry and for Western Australian agriculture. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Siddique. I do want to start also by acknowledging that we meet today on the traditional lands of the Whadjuk people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and extend those respects to any First Nations people in the room today. I didn't expect to see my photo so large up there. My electorate officers have suggested that if I had a hat, I could get a job with White Lady Funerals. Thank you to Professor Siddique for that warm welcome. And look, I thank and acknowledge all of the special guests. There was a very long list of special guests, so I thank you, Siddique, for going through our long list of special guests, and welcome to special guests and indeed all guests today. I'm incredibly happy to be here today covering off on the topic, paving the way for the future of WA agriculture, which is of course the theme of this event. And it's reflective of the forward-looking nature of the agricultural sector, particularly here in Western Australia. The next generation of Western Australian agriculture will be highly technical and will continue to embrace innovative technologies across digitisation, automation and precision farming. Of course, these are terms we're well familiar with in WA, but we will progress and elevate those technologies. The WA agriculture sector continues to grow and innovate, and it is an incredibly collaborative industry, I find, here in Western Australia. And here we have in this event the perfect collaboration of industry, academia and government. Now, the government here in Western Australia wishes to continue to create an enabling environment that supports this innovation, research and development. We have policies that encourage investment in agriculture, promote sustainable practices and provide the necessary infrastructure to enhance productivity and efficiency. Research and development will remain critical to maintain and grow production and address challenges from biosecurity threats, impacts of climate change and, of course, competition for land and water. And I am incredibly proud to be the Minister for the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development, who are at the cutting edge of R&D. In the 2023-24 WA state budget, we acknowledge the important work being done by that department, being done by DPIRD. We provided some additional funding support. So there was $47 million provided in this 23-24 year to progress the design of the new Metropolitan Biosecurity and Research Facility. Anyone who's been involved in DPIRD knows that our facilities are 50 years old, or more than 50 years old, I think, at Kensington site, and so we are, very keen to get into a new facility. We've allocated a total of $320 million to progress that project. I was also incredibly happy that in the recent budget we were able to get another $10 million to prepare for emergency animal diseases, so things like the threat of foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease. An additional $25 million to implement the electronic ID system for sheep and goats that will further strengthen our biosecurity system. For those of you not aware, we've had an electronic tagging system for cattle for a number of years. We are moving to a system nationwide. We have electronic tagging for sheep and goats. We recognise it's an additional cost for farm businesses, whether it be for the ear tags or for the actual infrastructure for scanning it. So that's where that $25 million has been allocated. We also announced in the latest budget $10 million to extend the Future Drought Fund program, and that is matched with Commonwealth funding. We're also incredibly keen to make sure that we have really strong businesses that can help diversify our economy, and agriculture is a prime sector that we can see will help diversify the WA economy and create more jobs moving forward. Yesterday, Premier Roger Cook announced the recipients of $148 million from the Investment Attraction Fund, and this fund is about those big operations, big innovative projects that will actually see more jobs created outside of our mining sector. I'm happy to announce that of that $148 million, it was across the whole WA economy. 13 of those projects were agriculture, agribusiness related, and a total of $53 million went to agri-tech, agri-food, agribusinesses out of that $148 million. I'm also happy to remind everyone that we have contributed, the state government has contributed $35 million to, or as a partner in a $35 million WA agricultural research collaboration. And that again is recognising the importance of R&D in our agri sector. It actually is forming a collaborative approach to research development and a unified vision to build research quality, capacity, careers and collaboration. It was launched in July 2022. And this whole of government collaboration brings together DPIRD, CSIRO, our Grower Group Alliance, UWA, Curtin, Edith Cowan and Murdoch universities. This initiative applies cutting-edge science to WA's unique challenges and opportunities, future-proofing the agriculture sector and delivering sustained growth and profitability. And those of us in the West know that a lot of our agricultural systems are different to the East Coast. Myself and Ben from CBH were just discussing that we'll be catching up with the Federal Minister Watt, and we'll have to continue Minister Watt's education about why things are a bit different here in WA. The WA Agricultural Research Collaboration positions WA to further our contribution to the national and international ag research priorities, but obviously with a focus to WA conditions. A key focus of this collaboration is to create opportunities for our next generations of scientists and leaders and to build meaningful agricultural careers in WA. This includes establishing industry-based postgraduate scholarship program to fund and support up to 16 PhD students a year, with PhD positions embedded within collaboration programs. The collaboration's first three programs, I should say, are Northern Agriculture, Grains Transformation and Climate Resilience, and they're focused on boosting productivity and profitability in a changing climate. This is in addition to the agricultural technologies, Aboriginal participation and capacity building and extension programs that support growth and long-term sustainability of the ag industry here in WA. In February 2024, so a few months away now, we will be hosting the 2024 AgriFutures Australia Evoke Ag Conference. For those of you not familiar with Evoke Ag, it is a conference that has been going since 2019. It was housed in Melbourne for the first couple of years. Last year it went to South Australia and hosted 1,600 delegates. The 2024 conference was actually planned to go back to Melbourne, but after the success of having a sellout crowd in South Australia of 1,600 participants, they realised they actually couldn't find a venue large enough in Melbourne. So they'll be coming here, and the expectation is that we will have more than 2,000 delegates coming to Western Australia for Evoke Ag. There is international interest. So we're already speaking to embassies, high commissioners, that sort of thing. There is significant interest. I think when they had it in South Australia, there was about 20 different countries involved. So we're incredibly excited that Australia's premier agri-food tech event is coming to to Western Australia. And what it does, it aims to connect the agri-food innovation community across Asia Pacific and around the world. The theme for this year's Evoke Ag is Exceptional Edge, and this event will allow WA to showcase our exceptional innovators, our researchers, our universities, and of course our farmers. With WA's strong connections with Asia, our excellent universities, as we've heard about, and our reputation has been an early adopter of both ag technology but also mining technology, like autonomous vehicles, we are in the perfect location to, live this theme of having the exceptional edge of cutting-edge technologies. Tickets are actually on sale for Evoke Ag, and I would encourage you all to actually look at the program. Department of Primary Ministers and Regional Development are also looking at side events. So when they had the event in South Australia, they had up to 30 side events. So again, I'd encourage the universities to be involved in that process. In conclusion, the Cook Government is committed to working with the WA agricultural industry to pave the way for the future, and I hope you are certainly inspired by today's forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, and Minister will stay till 3 o'clock, or? Yeah. Thank you once again. I would now like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies for today. In 2012, Tress Walmsley was appointed as the CEO of the InterGrain, which is a national cereal breeding business. I understand that they are now venturing into grain, legumes, and pulses too. Having joined the business at inception in 2007, as the first staff member, Tress played an integral role in building the company. She has an extensive understanding of plant breeding and over 20 years of agribusiness experience. I first met Tress during the Department of Agriculture days, somewhere in Three Springs. Tress spent more than 10 years with the DPAD. During this time, she played an industry leadership role in the development of the Australian grains industry and point royalty collection system, which really revolutionized plant breeding in Australia. And actually that paved the way for the plant breeding companies in Australia. In addition to her role on the UWA Agriculture Institute Industry Advisory Board, Tress is a director of the Australian Crop Breeders and the Chemistry Centre of Western Australia, a member of the Grains Australia Barley Council, and deputy chair of the Grains Industry Association of Western Australia. In 2020, Tress was the finalist Telstra Business Women's Award. In 2015, the WA Rural Woman of the Year, and in 1999, Telstra WA Young Woman. Tress, please.
All right, thank you, Siddique. I'm pleased to be a long-term member of the UWA Institute Advisory Board. The board plays a critical role in the Institute's strategic direction and industry engagement. It's made up of farmers, representatives of the agricultural industry, such as WAMCO, CSIRO, CBH, CSBP, InterGrain, Australian Agricultural Consultants, farmers, and DPIRD. The IAB, as we refer to ourselves, is an advisory board. We provide advice and support the university and the director to enhance the value of the institute to rural and regional industries through research, training and development. It also serves as a good opportunity for industry to understand the excellent work that the university does through the institute. One of our most powerful events that we do is actually to hold today's forum. And so let's get started with our topics and our presentations for today. Paving the way for the next generation of the WA agriculture. And so I'm going to welcome Trevor Whittington. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Trevor. Trevor grew up on a broadacre farm in Corrigan. He completed high school in Perth and ended up at UWA, where by Trevor's own admission, he failed dismally in economics faculty and then retreated to the arts faculty, where he struggled through to complete an honours in politics. Trevor says that being a slow learner, he then tried a master's in ag economics at Sydney University, where again he failed dismally. So he retreated once more to consider his options. Trevor then worked his way around the world on farms for the next couple of years. On return, he was drawn to the political world, where he spent the next 16 years as a political advisor to various ministers, including the fields of agriculture and fishing portfolios. Once again, he returned to UWA to complete a Master's in International Relations on Live Exports and a Master's of International Law on Sustainable Fishing. And at this point, I had made a mental note. I'm glad I don't have his HECS bill. In between jobs, he has worked for Aboriginal Corporation in the Kimberley, started a horticultural business in the southwest, imported agricultural machinery from Italy, exported produce to Asia, and is currently the CEO of WAFarmers. In his spare time, Trevor says he attempts to convince his son, who is a second-year student here at UWA in Ag Science, that he knows what he is doing. And he is going to face that test this year as he is back at the Corrigan farm attempting to sow a crop for the first time in 25 years. Welcome, Trevor.
And yes, I'm still paying off that HECS debt. Thank you, Tress, and thank you, Siddique, for the opportunity to be here. My time is short. I've got 23 minutes, 30 slides, and if any of you have to attempt to grind your way through my farm weekly article, a couple of thousand words, you know I've got a lot to say. So I'm going to hop straight into it, and away we go. So if I click this, that's me farming this year. So I'll jump straight to the next one. And the topic I've been given, we're addressing today, is the next generation in agriculture. It's a very open-ended question. So what are we talking about here? Is it the next generation of farmers? No, I think that after 3 to 6 generations of selective breeding, some interbreeding, our farmers are like resistant weeds. They're good at survival, so there will always be another generation of Western Australian farmers. Rather, my focus for the next 22 minutes will be on the question is, what do we need to do to put the whole agricultural ecosystem in Western Australia on the global map? What's needed to attract the best and brightest to our universities to study agricultural science? What's needed to attract the research dollars? What's needed to attract the investment in ag innovation? And what's needed to open up a raft of new opportunities for our graduates to grow the industry? So 2 words I'll cover repeatedly are science and innovation, something sorely lacking in the current discussion of agricultural policy in the halls of power. Those who follow me in the rural press will know I'm a vocal critic of all manner of government policy, relating to agriculture, and I have a fair bit to say about agricultural science, or rather the lack of it being funded by the state and federal government. A lot of my criticism, particularly in the last couple of years, has been directed at, be very slightly political for a moment, a former State Minister for Agriculture whose focus on regenerative and carbon farming was a topic I spent many thousands of hours dissecting. This is despite the fact that a good percentage of the community and farmers thought the minister was on the right track, and the future opportunities for our farmers was heavily tied up with using their soils to help address climate change. This may well be so, but as I repeatedly stated in my opinion pieces in the Farm Weekly, the science of climate change may be settled, but the science supporting farmers to address climate change is far from settled. And it needs far more help from the likes of Siddique and this university and others and his postgraduate researchers to do more of that basic agricultural science. So without a large and ongoing investment in science funding, the innovation cannot follow. Without the innovation, private investment won't follow, and with it, the financial motivation for farmers to address climate change. But I'm not going to talk about climate change. In fact, I'm not even going to talk about where the big opportunities lie in agriculture for the next generation. Be it growing 30 million tonnes of grain or producing carbon neutral meat or carbon farming, grain-based foods, GM breeding, ag chemicals, AI, value adding, opening the north, regenerating the south. I'm not going to talk about any of them because I don't know where the future lies for the next generation, and neither does any politician. But I know what's needed to get them excited and looking for the opportunities. And that's not vast amounts of additional government money for agricultural research to underwrite our institutions, which is what I'm sure many here would like me to be saying. No, as Siddique knows all too well, neither state nor federal governments, Liberal nor Labor, showing any great interest in properly funding the universities or the state departments of agriculture to up our spending on science. And for obvious reasons, I won't be calling on the farmers to pay higher levies to the research and development corporations, because that'll get me sacked. Not that I believe that they don't do an important job, but we don't need more Western Australian money flowing to the GODC over east. Rather it'd be better spent coming back to this institution. Rather, I think we need to get down into the seeds of the problem and grow our way into the future by being smarter with the money currently available. It's time to look at how we can shift funds around to underwrite the future opportunities and what will take us down the yellow brick road to the future world of agriculture. Make a mental note, Wizard of Oz, favourite movie of mine. I'll come back to it. We all know that governments can always find money when they want to buy votes and to fund mega projects. For some reason, agriculture attracts more than its fair share of mad government schemes in an attempt to grow agriculture. Europeans and Americans have subsidised and protected their farmers for decades. Australia established mandatory marketing boards like the old wheat board, potato board, wool reserve price scheme. The Russians and Chinese set up collective farms. They've all largely failed. Globally, governments have a bad track record when it comes to finding the yellow brick road, again, leading to growing the fat of the land. So here's a couple of my favourite examples. That's the Oriole Sea, was drained by the Soviet government in the 30s and 80s in an attempt to grow cotton. The other is the Ord River scheme up in the Kimberley, also attempting to grow cotton in the 50s and 60s. Both failed. The Russians found their sea was not regenerating itself. The Ord failed because of a lack of agricultural science. They didn't put the effort into understanding the pests and the challenges of growing cotton in the north of WA. But back again, we've got government spent another $500 million to set up Ord Stage 2, and yet again, they failed to learn from the past and failed to invest in the science, because without the science, we're not going to get a good return on that state and federal government dollars invested. And I shudder to think of the probably $2 billion in real dollars that's been spent on the Ord over the last 60 or 70 years. We'd put that into agricultural science and spread it across science and innovation across the state, where we would be. I suspect we'd be a little bit like Israel, and I'll touch on Israel shortly. So we know we're good at innovation. That's the Worsley handpiece, the first mechanical shearing aid, McKay's harvester, William Farrell, the wheat breeder who developed the first rust-resistant strain of centenary variety back in the turn of the century, an agricultural scientist, agronomist, featured on the old $2 note. So then we can add Pink Lady apples, came out of the Ag Department, Ozplow cedar. There's literally hundreds of great innovations across agriculture, both Western Australia and the nation. Add to that, the fact is that we know our universities, are world class in agricultural education and research. In fact, we now have 33 institutions offering some form of ag education, with UWA leading the way. So our ecosystem has the innovation smarts and the intellectual horsepower to drive outcomes. We just need to know how to fuel it. In the old days, the fuel was largely state government funding. The yellow brick road led from the university to the Department of Agriculture to the paddock, but that road has shrunk to barely a track these days. And at its peak back in the 70s, early 80s, Bruce and Mark and others around here, overly familiar with the department, recall nearly 2,000 staff, running 7 research stations, employing up to 30 graduates a year, almost all coming from UWA. But by the end of 2000, the staff numbers had fallen to 1,500, and it continued to fall under both sides of politics. And today we have an agency called DPIRD with Ag buried in it, and a minister doing her very best, credit to the minister, with her focus on biosecurity and trying to get more money. So credit to dealing with a difficult treasury situation. Hence, it's no longer the Department of Agriculture as the normal pathway for every graduate to look to follow. Unfortunately, state-based science jobs have not been replaced at the federal level as the funding has moved to the new RDCs. Neither have the CSIRO or the 14 National Research Development Corporations that emerged in the 1990s, GRDC, MLA, etc., you can see on the board, have really been able to pick up the slack. And to this, the federal government has capped its own contribution to 0.5% of farm gate production, around 400 million, and the farms levies are generating roughly another 1%, 600 million, but it's not enough to underwrite agriculture at its true potential. So then we go to the federal government's funding for R&D. It's been falling in real terms since the 1990s, and the story gets worse when you look at the funding going to the universities, which is the growth of student numbers has continued to rise. They have struggled to receive what they need to support postgraduate research. And that is going to impact our ability to support the economy and the community at large. On the upside, there's been an increase in funding in the private sector with around $2.2 billion, or about 3% of production. Unfortunately, a lot of that money is from the big corporations, heavily focused on chemicals and sales of chemicals. It's a very limited part of the agricultural ecosystem. So we need to look at what else is out there. Who else in the world has cracked this problem? So if you look at the top universities around the world, at the top 5 listed there, number 1 is Wageningen. I can't say that properly. Close enough. Obviously know which it is. The next 4 are Chinese universities. And they are specialist universities. It is a model, and it is a model that works well, but it takes foresight. And unfortunately, our governments, when they rebooted the education system, tertiary education system, back in the late 80s, missed that opportunity. The Chinese have underwritten the growth by increasing their R&D spending on ag science and research 500% in the last 20 years. That has driven a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that's why there is a large number of Chinese players in the chemical and plant breeding space. But that has taken a lot of investment. So we jump forward to look at other models. So I'm afraid our government's not going to write the sort of cheques the Dutch and Chinese have done, and even through there's clear evidence that well-funded specialist agricultural universities do supercharge the broader ag ecosystem, a specialist university is not on the table. But maybe the old farmer saying, get big or get out is an option. Adelaide and South Australia are going down that route at the moment and building a university of 50,000 students. So imagine what we could achieve if UWA and Curtin or Murdoch amalgamated, but don't hold your breath. That's been tried over and again, and I suspect you'd need a lot of gold to be given to vice-chancellors before they would go down that pathway, but I digress. So where to from here? Maybe Strawman, Wizard of Oz, is onto something when he says he just wants a brain. Maybe we need to use our creative brains to find a new pathway. So there is actually another bucket of money out there that we should be looking at, and that's the federal government's annual $9 billion in direct support for research and development, including $3.2 billion in R&D tax incentives. It's a multi-sector pool of money, and it has largely been overlooked by the ag innovation sector, but it has huge potential. So what we need to do is pour some fertiliser on the potential, and the obvious potential is ag tech. So ag tech is nothing new. We've all heard what ag tech is. It's actually older than you think. It goes right back to the digital revolution. There's Bill Gates, Apple, 1970s. The only problem is ag has been slow to pick up on its full potential. So we know lots about precision agriculture, but ag tech is much broader than that. It's automated equipment, supply chain management, smart greenhouses, livestock management, biotechnology. It's the full gamut of agriculture. And to be clear, the future of agriculture for the graduates in this room, the future is not just primary production of growing more food and fibre. It's also very much linked to the secondary and tertiary production of ideas and products that support primary production. This is the exciting future for agriculture that we should be seriously looking to cranking up. We know how from little things grow, big things can also, little things, big things grow. We're looking at the potential of global markets to run with a new ag tech innovation. But the government is not going to support gearing up our ag ecosystem to, if the government's not going to support it, who is? Where are we going to find the money? Now, we've all heard about venture capital. So let's explore venture capital for a little bit. Let's look at some numbers. Venture capital globally last year was around $500 billion. Ag tech got roughly 2% of that, which is around $10 billion. Australia just got 1% of that, which is around 100 million, of the global ag tech venture capital funding bucket. That's 1% of 2% of $500 billion. So how big is the ag tech products market? Well, last year it was $50 billion. Put that in context, that's 5 times bigger than the total production of food and produce out of WA. Recognise these guys? They got a kickstart through venture capital. Latician founders, Mick Cannon-Brooks and Scott Farquhar, started with $10,000, now have a net worth of $17 billion each. Designers of Canva got a head start with a government grant of $1.3 million back in 2013 and are now worth $16 billion each. Now these guys are not just loaded with gold, they also pay good coin to their thousands of Australian employees. Canva has 1,400. Atlassian has 2,800 based in Australia. Click. I'm going to skip the video and just stick, I'll just go back a second. So there's a video of ag tech, that's a machine picking apples, but we all know what ag tech is. So, but there's thousands of successful ag tech startups around the world. Here's 4. Cooler Bio out of the US raised $72 million last year for nitrogen fixing microbes. Nobel raised $100 million for cheese from plants. Trevor, this model up here, raised $32 million for a flying robot for fruit picking. Croppin raised $10,000 to design their Smart Farms record app in 2016. Today it's valued at over $100 million. But unfortunately, Australia has been missing out on the bonanza of the potential of ag tech. So, just to be clear, venture capital is to ag tech's future. Some more facts. 43% of large public US companies founded in the last 40 years had some level of venture capital backing. And these venture capital backed companies now account for 42% of the R&D spending in the US and 38% of major corporation employment. The money is real. We just need to work out how to tap into it. So, today, unfortunately, Australia is attracting just $1 for every $650 the US is attracting in ag tech startups. But it would not take a lot of tweaking of the government's R&D funding bucket to put WA ag tech startups on the map. We need to aim to set a target to lift that $1 to $6.50, or just 1% of the US ag tech funding bucket, which last year in the US was $5 billion, spread across 440 major deals, a lot more money for others, smaller deals, at 10 million each. We got 1% of that. That would bring into WA $50 million. If you put that across 50 deals at $1 million each, that's a major shot in the arm for second round investment. To that, you could add the already existing $100 million that's at the national level. It is a highly achievable target when compared to what the West Perth mining sector raises every year. But it would take some seed capital to kick that attraction of that $50 million into the state. The question again is, where does that seed capital come from? And what is our argument to the global capital markets on why they should look at Western Australia? Well, Western Australia offers one of the very few examples of the countries that can be a full supermarket under one jurisdiction. Our ecosystem starts with the fact that we're the only state that can offer cotton and cocoa production in the subtropics in the Kimberley, through to avocados and apples in the Great Southern. To add to that, we have a sophisticated risk-taking venture capital culture in our mining sector, a high-tech engineering sector, which is also driven out of the mining sector. We are home to some of the world's most sophisticated mining software, and there is $200 billion floating around the state in and out through the mining petroleum sector. It's 20 times bigger than the ag sector, but it provides its own ecosystem that we can leverage off. Adding to that, we have our universities that can produce the people and the farmers that control the tech. We have the perfect ecosystem to follow the example of Israel and the United States. We just need to add some water, dollars, to make it grow. So, where are we up to? So as I started out, we don't need to attempt to pick winners like the Ord River scheme. Rather, we need to spread our bets widely and wisely. What we want to see is not $500 million into another Ord, but $500 million into 1,000 blooming flowers. If we can crack just one of these startups, we bring home the gold, cliche after cliche. So where is the money, again, going to come from? The state government, fortunately, has joined the dots and has established a $16.7 million new industries fund, which over 4 years, it's just $4 million a year, but it's a step in the right direction. It supports new startups. It's called the Venture Support Program, WAVES. This is a start, but we have to share this pool with all the other sectors. What we need is our own ag startup fund. There is a bucket of money we could tap, and it's called the $7 million Mining Exploration Incentive Scheme. I was around as the Chief of Staff when it was kicked off back at around 2008. It was good enough to fund the well-developed mining sector to help them go exploring. Then I suggest it's good enough to fund the underdeveloped ag tech sector in the state. Failing that, just rename the mining scheme the agricultural scheme and reallocate the funds. $7 million is $100,000 each for 70 startups as seed capital. That's, when you add that up, that's enough to attract that $50 million as secondary funding for 50 projects at $1 million a year. If we follow the Israeli example where they take some state government funding and they get 1% of the equity that can't be diluted, and anything that fires, which we'll see very briefly in Israel soon, that money can be reinvested. It becomes like the magic pudding for ag. So, where are we? That's the Innovation Fund sorted. What about the science? Imagine if the federal government backed agriculture like they do with their $20 billion Medical Research Future Fund. This was set up in 2015, currently hands out $630 million a year to support the development of new drugs, devices, treatments and cures. We need our own Agricultural Science Research Future Fund to support our universities. But luckily, we don't have to go begging for billions of dollars because a fund already exists with billions of dollars in it. This is what's going to upset a couple of people in the room, but here we go. It's called the Future Drought Fund. It has $5 billion in it, and every year they hand out around $10 million to the 8 hubs around the nation. Problem is, none of my 1,000 farm members, the WAFarmers, think it's a priority because they already plan for drought. Mostly they plan for drought to buy the neighbour when the neighbour goes broke. So there will be no complaints if this $10 million that's currently on average allocated to the West Australian hub was reallocated. That's the drought hub. And look, the drought hub is struggling a bit because it is, looking around to find projects. Some of them don't really fit. I've got a couple here. Drought-resistant cover crops and vineyards. My chair wines at WA, they're not complaining. Jackie would know, turn on the irrigation or the vines. They don't mind a bit of a struggle. Wines can be better. My favourite one they're funding is for drone-mounted feral species identification, which will help them separate the cats from the camels. Not sure the farmers and pastoralists see that's a priority, but I can guarantee all of them would like to see more dollars to go into core agricultural research. The money would be far better pushing the research boundaries at places like UWA to improve productivity on farm. So if that money went back into a new, which the Minister spoke about, a very good initiative of this government, the Cooperative Research Centre, and even better, if we could leverage another $10 million out of the state government, that would make a pool of around $30 million that's up for grabs for our universities to target for agriculture science. Now, the other states want to keep their funds for their drought hubs. Fine, we will go it alone, and I suggest target ag tech. Israel, I mentioned Israel a couple of times. So this is the last piece of the equation. So I've covered innovation, buckets for venture capital. I've targeted ag science through the hub. So the Chinese have followed the Dutch model. We should follow with the focused universities. We should follow the Israelis model. Back in the 70s, Israel made the decision to crank its ag tech sector as one of its pillars of the smart startup nation. 50 years, startup culture is in their DNA. We ask kids at Israel what they want to be when they grow up, and they'll say a doctor, a lawyer, or they want to start up their own tech business. It is in their DNA. Currently, they have 500 highly successful agri-food tech companies now operating, and they have a similar foundation as what I think we should have. It's called the Bio-Tony or Industrial R&D Foundation, BIRD. It's allocated around $500 million over the last 50 years into 1,000 projects. It's only putting up around $10 million a year, but it's leveraging it up. It has been incredibly successful. So this is my last slide. And so, just to reiterate, my suggestion is to reallocate 2 existing funding buckets, one for $7 million from the Exploration Incentive Scheme into a venture capital fund, and for the state government to match it, to use it as a equity levy. So 1% is owned by the state, and if one of those fires, It's the magic pudding I alluded to earlier. And the other is for 10 million from the Drought Hub to go to the university's cooperative research, and hopefully we can leverage that up more. This will feed the agriculture scientists and our ag engineers and incentivise the ag tech entrepreneurs to feed off their ideas. If the Israelis can do it, so can we. The Americans have built massive companies out of venture capital, so can we. We just need to find the seed capital. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Quite thought-provoking for us all. Just to mention, we are going to hold questions until our panel session. So we are going to go straight into our next speaker, which is Dr. Fiona Dempster. Fiona is a research fellow at the University of Western Australia and an experienced farmer. Growing food in a sustainable, profitable way is a key goal for global agriculture. Fiona's research is focused on helping farmers meet this goal through integrating knowledge on all aspects of a farm, including crop science, profit, risk and motivations into decision making. She draws inspiration from the northern wheatbelt farming communities where she lives and operates a 6,000 hectare cropping and livestock business in her partnership. Fiona says she feels privileged to hold the leadership position of Deputy Director at the Centre for Agriculture and Economics and Development at UWA. She also has advisory positions with the Australian Farm Institute and Farming for the Future, and is a former member of the GRDC Western Panel. Please welcome Fiona.
Thanks, Tress. That was a very kind introduction. All right. Hello, and thank you very much for the invitation to talk to you today about the next generation in agriculture. With 3 kids of my own, it's certainly a topic that's discussed regularly in our household. So I grew up in the city, and about 13 years ago moved to the farm and a farming community with my husband. Since then, I've grown my research career and been really fortunate to work across both research and farming. And today I want to talk about, I guess, a few things that I've learnt along the way, which has really helped me in making research impact. And those are briefly to be there, be curious, and just keep coming back. So first I want to talk about is it's really just about understanding who you're dealing with. I live with a farmer, so I've got a pretty good idea about what makes them tick. But just as researchers would take the time and have incredible knowledge around, say, plant physiology, soil structure, supply chains, it's, I feel, equally important to understand what motivates farmers in their decision making. What are the drivers of adoption and disadoption of new technologies and practices in their business? I mean, ultimately, adoption is more than yield and profit. You've got to take into consideration the broader picture around logistics, social norms, risk appetite. Those things are really important because farm decision making is a whole system. It's not about the individual parts. It's the whole box and dice. For many of you that know a farmer, you'd appreciate or understand that it's a 24/7 job. It's a lifestyle, some may say. Business is done in the paddock, in the sheep yards, unfortunately on holidays, and even in the maternity ward. So the phone's never turned off. It's rarely unanswered. And so it's, just something that's done all the time. I think goodwill is a real cornerstone in activity and in our industry. For example, donating trial plots, sharing knowledge, making introductions. Those are things that farmers, researchers and consultants and other members of the industry just do as second nature. But with any, I guess, good relationship, it's important to give and take, to respect people's skills and their time. And as a researcher, it's pretty critical to think about what am I giving back with my research? What's the value proposition here? And to be fair, I've seen a few examples of where researchers have probably bumped up the value proposition, perhaps a bit too much, and it doesn't quite pass the paddock test. So it's important to stay grounded and really think about how it can sort of fit within the business. Just one example, I was mentoring a PhD student, and she was working on the optimal rate of lime in wheat production. And she was from Iran, and she wasn't familiar with farming systems in Western Australia. And so her supervisors suggested that she come and take a look at a lime operation. So I took her over to the neighbour's farm because he was doing some lime spreading and was standing around the tractor having a chat. And she, quite boldly said to him, well, my model's showing that the optimal rate of lime is 10 tonnes to the hectare. And he looked a bit bemused and he said, oh gosh, okay, well, I'm going to be here all year because this spreader only holds 10 tonnes. So it was, and she really took that on board and went back, and it provided really great insight into her modelling and her PhD. So let's consider the future landscape of agriculture. And thanks, Trevor, that was a really inspiring look at what we can think about for the future. What's agriculture going to look like? As Trevor mentioned, I don't know, but I think we can have a crack at thinking about who are our research end users going to be, who's going to be farming the land. It's been in a family farming business sort of environment for a long time now. But are we seeing a shift to corporate agriculture and corporate farming? And what are the sort of differences between family and corporate businesses that researchers in the industry might want to consider? So, for example, things like the OH&S requirements from corporate businesses are potentially more stringent than other family businesses, and that may impact on the way that you can conduct your research. Also, some beneficial things around the scale of some of these businesses and their ability to capture data over multiple locations, I think is a real positive and a real opportunity. Many of them have graduate and internship programs, and lots of them are present on social media and able to advocate your work and your research. So we've heard a little bit about, and just should mention about data capture, with that being available on all new machines, that is a real opportunity for researchers to delve into what data we're collecting and to try and deliver some real insight back to farmers. We've heard a bit about the new technology that we might be seeing in the future, and we're certainly seeing lots of precision machines, sensors on machines, automated machines, new crop varieties, new chemistries, lots of exciting things coming into the industry. I'm actually really impressed with some of the trial software where a researcher can design a trial and it can get fed straight into the farmer's machine, like the fertiliser spreader, and we can see trials implemented across whole paddocks, which I think is great for really capturing that variation in soil type and weather, which is really what farmers want to know about how these things perform on their own property. And I guess with land consolidation and ownership and some of these labour-saving technologies, I think it is worth just recognising that we are already we work in an isolated industry. There are significant mental health considerations, and that's just really something that governments and researchers should be mindful of, that potentially those issues could continue on in the future. So my tips for how the next generation of researchers can make an impact in agriculture. You are, I guess, you're far more connected to the digital world than my generation. We grew up with the landline phone. So I think that being able to connect with, other institutions globally to gain insight on our, problems that we are having WA agriculture will be a real benefit, and hopefully it will lead to some of that transformation in knowledge that Trevor spoke about. With that, sort of continual interaction will hopefully bring collaboration, which it's so vital for research impact, and to provide that new and different perspective. And I feel that institutions and governments can really help and support there by, even simple things like having advisory boards for research centres and institutions is a really good example. Some of the government supported industry fellowships are great. And my personal favourite is the Australian Herbicide Resistance Initiative, who has a resident farmer who cruises the whole way, talking to researchers, really, ground truthing what they're doing and helping them to bring that knowledge to farmers. I think that's a really great initiative. The second point is coming back to around understanding those constraints that farmers have in their business that really, limits or drives, limits adoption of some of this new technology. And my third point, I just want to remind everyone that we're humans and we're social beings, and there is immense sort of learning and a high level of cognition that that happens when we socially connect with each other. So being out there in the paddock, smelling the wheat crop haying off, just looking at things in real time, happening is really valuable. Particularly for researchers to really understand the environment and that context. So thanks very much for listening, and I just wanted to say, for the researchers, I feel it's just really important to just be there on the farm, be curious, ask lots of questions, and just keep coming back. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. All right, we're actually tracking a few minutes ahead of time, which is a great thing. So maybe after the next speaker, we might just all stand up and stretch our legs. But right now, we're going to launch straight into our next speaker, which is Sally Panizza. And Sally is the first female Director of Agricultural Education for the WA Department of Education, a position that she has held since 2020. This followed her appointment as the first female principal of the WA College of Agriculture, Cunderdin, in 2018. Under her leadership, Cunderdin Ag topped the state for the WACE achievement in 2018, 2019 and 2020. Sally was a finalist in the department's Women of Achievement Award in 2021 and was one of 20 principals who completed a Harvard Principal Fellowship in 2019. In addition to her work in education, Sally has extensive experience in agriculture as a wheat and sheep farmer in Southern Cross alongside her husband and children. She is a passionate advocate for agriculture education, working closely with industry and with schools to ensure that our students in WA public schools are on a successful trajectory to post-school pathways in agriculture-related careers. Sally will share with us today how the Department of Education is paving the way for the next generation in agriculture. Please welcome Sally.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by also acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we meet on today, the Whadjuk Noongar people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. In WA agriculture, I always find the Noongar seasons a much better fit for our farming, and it is clear that we're in the season of Mackaroo today, the coldest and wettest time of the year. It is interesting to note that the theme of today's industry forum, Paving the Way for the Next Generation of WA Agriculture, directly links to the first pillar of our Department of Education strategic plan, provide every student a pathway to a successful future. This is something that our agricultural colleges do really well, and I will be sharing more about that with you today. As was discussed in my opening bio, I also farm 16,000 hectares in the wheat belt just south of Southern Cross with my husband and 3 children, who are the 4th generation on our farm. Being a farmer and an educator brings diversity and strength to my current role. It is worth noting that when I first moved to Southern Cross in 1993, women could not even be classed as a farmer in the Australian census. I also think my very recent roles of being a principal and a director in Ag Ed as the first female is something that it's remarkable that that hasn't happened earlier. It's really great to note that we now have 4 other women who've led our ag colleges very successfully, and I hope that I'm only the first of many female directors of agricultural education. I feel very positive about the gains that our industry is making in creating opportunities for a more diverse range of students, including girls. So that's me at home in our emu canola crop last year. We have 5 WA colleges of agriculture in WA: Cunderdin, Denmark, Harvey, Morawa and Narrogin. Our colleges have a long and proud history of educating senior secondary students on commercially viable farms. We have over 600 students in years 10 to 12 across the state enrolled in these specialist agriculture programs. With demand for places high, each college has a selection process that students go through, including interviews. Students are rated against 7 criteria: interest in agriculture curriculum, interest in agriculture-related trades or certificates, positive and safe behaviour. We are working farms, and with the things around OSH, we need kids who can behave. Attitude and effort, attendance, reason for applying to the college, and if necessary, residential compatibility. As senior secondary campuses, and with students so close to entering the workforce, there is a deliberate focus on creating a young adult work environment, which I find most students thrive in. In addition to our 5 ag colleges, we also have 9 schools with farm programs across both regional and metropolitan locations. These schools are going from strength to strength and exposing a broader range of students to agriculture, which is critically important when we have stats floating around saying there are 6 jobs for every agriculture graduate. As you can see, we have some significant land holdings across WA in the department, with a variety of agricultural experiences from cropping, dairy, horticulture, aquaculture, cattle, equine, poultry, pigs, sheep, viticulture, and we even are now the proud owners of a new herd of Nigerian dwarf goats at Kiara College. We are currently also undertaking a feasibility study into the possibility of an ag college in the Kimberley, which we hope to conclude later this year. While each ag college is unique, all 5 basically have the same structure and are made up of 4 important parts: farm, class, residence and trades. The majority of our students live on site with a range of after-school and weekend activities available to enhance their learning. We aim for every graduate of an ag college to achieve a Cert 2 in agriculture, with a range of Cert 2 and 3 additional training options, including horse care, shearing, wool handling, pork production and horticulture. All colleges have well-equipped trade centres, offering Cert 2 quals in furniture making, engineering, construction and automotives. In class, students can study at either an ATAR or general level across a range of subjects including English, maths, animal production systems and plant production systems. It is exciting to note the 2024 replacement of the old animal production system and plant production system courses with 2 new ATAR courses, Agricultural Science and Technology and Agribusiness, which better align with university courses and current careers across the agricultural industry. What is exciting about these new courses is any school can teach them. They don't have to be an agricultural college with access to a farm. This slide shows the number of students choosing an ATAR pathway across our ag colleges in blue. And in a similar trend to schools across WA, we can see a decline in the number of students picking an ATAR pathway. What is pleasing to note, however, is that the number of students with a successful ATAR result, which is in orange, is remaining fairly stable. I am sure many of you are aware of the current work commissioned by our Minister for Education into the Pathways to Post-School Success Review, and I look forward to these recommendations, particularly around ATAR, and hopefully we'll come up with some innovations that will get more kids into an ATAR pathway. This is probably my favourite slide of our presentation. Our ag colleges, we sourced this destination data through phone calls to each graduate in term 1 of the following year. This data has been tracked over time and consistently highlights the strong post-school pathways for our students. Half of the total students went straight into employment, with 40% in agricultural fields and 11% in non-agricultural. 31% started apprenticeships and 9% of our students enrolled straight into university. Of our Aboriginal students, 50% have gone into agriculture-related employment, a quarter into agriculture-related apprenticeships, and another quarter into full-time training. This is the second year in a row that all our Aboriginal students have transitioned into a post-school pathway, a stat that our principals should be justifiably proud of. With all our agricultural colleges registered training organisations in their own right, this graph shows you the range of qualifications achieved by our students, with the orange being the 2022 quals and the blue the 2021. Our students achieved an average of 3.6 certificates per student, ensuring they are well prepared for the workforce. While we haven't specifically captured this data, we have noticed a rise in the number of students leaving school early to undertake apprenticeship or work opportunities. Anecdotally, one of our principals noted 9 Year 11s not returning at the start of this year when it was usually about 2 to 3, which we put down to a reflection of the tight labour market at the moment. In 2022, we commenced gathering data on the certificates achieved across our farm schools as well as our ag colleges that are relevant to agriculture. The Cert 2 Agriculture was the most commonly achieved certificate at farm schools. Agricultural education has a really strong relationship with industry. Agricultural programs at both our agricultural colleges and farm schools are well supported by agricultural advisory committees made up of ministerially appointed volunteers with extensive industry experience to provide advice and support to each school. Representatives from the agricultural advisory committees come together as a combined agricultural advisory committee known as the CAC. Terrible name, I know. This committee works closely with me, and the executive also meet with the Minister for Education. Their support and advice is really valued, as is the connections we have with a range of other industry bodies. If anyone here is interested in volunteering on one of these committees, please reach out to one of our schools to discuss further. We have also taken advantage of a number of grants, including the Internet of Things, iFarms and AgriFuture grants, to ensure that we are exposing our students to the latest technology in agriculture. Teachers from our agricultural colleges and farm schools are part of the Agriculture Educators Association of WA, and I work with the Executive Committee as needed to ensure professional learning keeps our teachers at the forefront of research. Last December, our staff attended both UWA, including the Shenton Park Research Station, and Murdoch University to see their meat lab. These relationships and opportunities are critical, and we thank both institutions for supporting our teachers. A bold initiative some of you may be familiar with is the interagency collaboration between the Departments of Primary Industries and Regional Development, Training and Workforce Development and Education, known as PRIMED. This project aims to increase understanding of primary industries and related careers for secondary students in all regions, particularly metropolitan students. The Department of Education has created a suite of resources for students in Years 7 to 10 across the subject areas of science, technologies and humanities and social sciences, specifically for agriculture. One of our KPIs for the Prime project has been to shift student perception of primary industries, to expand understanding of modern primary industries, the broad range of career opportunities, and the alignment to the range of drivers of student choices for career pathways. The primed team has worked with the career practitioners and upskilled lead teachers in each region, as well as an increased presence at career events to ensure students are aware of the current opportunities. Finally, I would like to make you all aware of the range of career opportunities and benefits to working in one of our ag colleges or farm schools. I know I am biased, but they are just amazing places to work, and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of the next generation of agriculture in WA is so rewarding. I'm happy to chat to any interested candidates later today, or you can contact me following today's presentation if you want more information on this. I hope after that quick crash course in agricultural education, you have a better understanding of what is happening in the secondary context. I must acknowledge the passion and dedication of our staff in our schools, as well as my team in Central Office. Our motto is excellence and innovation in agricultural education, and the future of Ag Ed is certainly bright.
Thank you, Sally. As a proud parent of a daughter who is currently completing Year 12 at Narrogin Ag College, I can absolutely support everything that Sally has said. And I was ecstatic when my daughter said to me, packing to go back to Narrogin on the weekend, she said, "Mum, you know, I've been thinking maybe I do need to go to university and I would like to study plant sciences." And I went, woo! Just after she had filled in her application to work at CBH for a casual summer job. There's my plug, Ben. Okay, so next up, I would like to ask Georgia Pugh, who's going to give her perspective on fast-tracking ag tech adoption for the next generation. Georgia is an experienced agribusiness consultant working with Next Gen Agri International. She specialises in providing strategic business and livestock breeding advice, as well as agricultural technology adoption support to optimise farm performance and operational efficiency. Her focus is on helping farmers to navigate and accelerate gains made at the intersection of ag tech, genetics, business management and sustainability. She is passionate about supporting farmers to improve their bottom line while future-proofing their businesses for generations to come. Georgia has a strong background and deep understanding of operations and key performance drivers across all levels of food and agriculture. She grew up on and continues to have an active interest in her family's mixed cropping and livestock farm at Narracrup. She has worked as an advisor specialising at the intersection of agriculture, technology and sustainability to help farmers unlock their full potential. She has also worked as a senior commercial analyst at a large international food processing and logistics agribusiness and as a specialist ag tech R&D incentives consultant at PwC. Georgia holds a bachelor's degree in agricultural science with first class honours and a Bachelor of Commerce with majors in accounting, entrepreneurship and innovation from UWA. Please welcome Georgia.
I'm going to stand over here just to stretch the legs and mix it up a little bit. Thanks very much for having me. It's wonderful to be back at UWA again and to share some things that I've learned in the past 8 years I've been away. Wrong way. So yeah, as per the introduction, I'm here to talk more about ag tech, but from the perspective of a consultant that has been spending my last 5 years helping farmers adopt and navigate the sector, and also I've had previous involvement working with the Mike Cannon-Brookes-backed venture capital firm, so spent a lot of time working with the actual startups and actually doing the investments itself in the ag tech space. So hopefully I can share some words of wisdom, but I think that's enough about me. So let's talk about the future with ag tech. What are some of the key trends we're seeing out there? Now, I'm glad that some of these have not been mentioned today, so hopefully I can share some cutting edge trends that we can all take home and get excited about. Augmented and virtual reality. This is a super cool space, and no, we don't all need to be wearing these crazy goggles and wandering around looking like idiots. It can be as simple as having virtual 360-degree tours like Eggs Australia have now done on their website. A really important way to break down and barriers between the city and the country and help consumers understand how their food is being produced. And also, improving safety, having virtual stud stock sales for the cattle and sheep industries, using virtual reality to help diagnose issues mechanically in the field with harvesters and tractors. I know John Deere and CNH are doing a lot of work in this space. Artificial intelligence and facial recognition technology. Now, I'm going to be that person that goes, yes, EID tags are cool and good, and we should all be following and using those, but I'm also a little bit skeptical about using EID tags in the sheep industry. And my company are actually, my colleague, Dr. Mark Ferguson's actually developed the GeneSmith facial recognition business, a startup that we're doing the facial recognition technology for sheep. So imagine just having a few cameras out there doing the data collection and matching for you, rather than having to invest in thousands of EID tags. This is a future that will be possible hopefully soon. But yeah, very much in early stage trials. But imagine the power we can get when we know not only how many fetuses were in a ewe when they walk out after scanning, but actually knowing how many they ended up having and how those lambs did, how many kilos they were, and actually having all that data to be able to make informed breeding decisions. They're also doing this with cattle as well, in having animal health and well-being at the forefront of the data collection. Remote sensing and machine learning. SIBO labs are doing some wonderful things with, estimating food on offer in the paddocks using satellite data. That gives you the ability to then match your stocking rates with the food on offer estimates that those satellites are giving you. How powerful is that? Giving you the ability to have really down to the specific number estimates of food on offer, matching your stocking rates, ensuring you have the ground coverage you need to prevent things like unsustainable grazing levels. Super powerful. Rapid Aim are giving the information of using sensors to tell you when the insects are actually invading your orchards, so you know exactly where to go and spray and when. So you can be more selective in the spraying that you do. I won't talk anymore about drones and robots, but yeah, that's definitely another key area. I know there's about 4 or 5 swarm farm robots in Western Australia now, so they're definitely a very exciting integrated autonomy opportunity. Non-chemical weeding, UWA's own weed chipper, amazing. There's definitely a drive for the use of less chemicals in agriculture, and the UWA weed chip is an exciting prospect to help tackle that. There's also other startups out there looking at electrically blasting the weeds as well, is another area that's pretty interesting and one to look out for. Decarbonisation, I want to talk about this briefly. So green ammonia opportunities like Jupiter Ionics are doing super exciting, and this is an opportunity to start, allowing agriculture to become the solution to the carbon problem by using low carbon fertilisers such as green ammonia. Ruminate, the use of Asparagopsis to reduce the emissions of methane is certainly an exciting area where agriculture can really change the conversation and become a solution to climate change. There's a lot of other areas in ag tech that I could definitely talk about all day, but I'm happy to talk more about with you later if you'd like to come and have a chat with me. Now, I want to spend the rest of my talk about how do we actually sees this opportunity and how do we actually make this happen, this future with AgTech. Now, before we do this, we need to talk about where does AgTech actually come from, and startups has been thrown around, but I want us to take a second to actually talk about what are startups. So, as you know, startups are people who only have a couple of people in the office. They have no money, no resources. They might be getting some funding, a few grants. They're very acting on a skeleton kind of a budget. Scale-ups are definitely getting involved, and they're the more mature AgTech startups. Mature companies in agriculture are getting involved, and probably more commonly as well is the companies like Microsoft are getting involved, so not coming from an agricultural background. But the reason why I wanted to talk a bit more about startups is they need your help, they need our help as an industry to be able to work with them and provide feedback, because a lot of startups are struggling. They come from engineering, tech, all sorts of different backgrounds, and they're not experts in agriculture, but they're bringing and applying their skills to the industry, which I think is fantastic. So it's definitely important to be mindful because they're filling a gap in the market. So as industry participants, we can work together, provide feedback, that's all constructive, and be part of the conversation when it comes to how these products are being developed and how they're getting refined and iterated. So yes, AgTech can often miss the mark, and I just wanted to touch on this a little bit more because I know there are some skeptics out there, as well as many enthusiasts. But AgTech is still an emerging industry. It's come a long way and it is making a lot of inroads, but it is still early days and there is still a race on to be the winner. How many people have been going out there to find some AgTech or know someone looking for AgTech and getting really overwhelmed with the thousands of options out there of tech companies that they could use? It's a true problem and it is confusing. So be patient and set expectations. How many people have more than 3 streaming services? I have 4 for my entertainment at home. Look, one day there will be 1 streaming service, I hope, and I don't have to have 4. And I think AgTech will be like that. One day it'll become more consolidated as well. The AgTech ecosystem is maturing, as I said. There's some big dollars being spent on AgTech globally, and I do think that Australia is pulling its weight. There are some really exciting startups out of Western Australia as well, which is fantastic, and I hope many more will come. Now, how do we actually get started with AgTech? How do we support farmers? How do we as researchers help translate and consultants help translate this space just to make us realise this future? The AgTech adoption journey is something I've spent a lot of time on through roles with farmers to founders, Agthentic Advisory and Tenacious Ventures, which I mentioned before. It is really important to not just go out there and just go, yes, that's exciting, let's try that piece of tech and rock and roll with it. That's just awesome. No, I love the enthusiasm, but I really think, and I encourage my clients to start with a problem. I don't ever go out and say, you should be doing this, it's so cool. I go, where are your bottlenecks? Where are your biggest costs? Where are you getting frustrated at how much time you're having to spend doing something? I start with the problem and looking for ways to improve. That's always the first place to start. And then what are your must-haves? What's your criteria? What's nice to have? What's a must-have? What are you actually looking for in a solution to help you solve that problem? Then it's time to go and search. And I encourage everyone in the industry to look in many places. AgTech is such an evolving, fast-paced industry. Places like social media, conferences like Evoke Ag, reading the paper, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. It's all important and part of the sharing of information globally. So when you are searching, it's obviously important to then filter and apply your criteria and iterate that criteria and spend the time to get that right before you come down to a short list of startups that you might want to try. I do really encourage my clients and people I've worked with in the past to then reach out directly to the AgTech company. Don't just assume that the email address or the information form that you fill in on their website is going to go to someone, Joe Blog, offshore. It's actually often going to the startup founders themselves. So it's really important to be mindful of that and use language that's polite and considerate and constructive as well. And yeah, there's often free trials that you can do, and I encourage all of my clients to do the free 2-week trial or start really small and go steady and slow. You know, don't just try something on the whole farm, start in one paddock or start in a small area. So I mentioned some places to find ag tech. There's a lot of stuff on this slide, I know, but I mentioned podcasts, conferences, a website like AgTech Finder, Evoke Ag, all wonderful places. Social media, feel free to take a photo of this slide or I can share it with you later. But that's where I point my clients to in order to how to get started in that space. Now I really wanted to touch super quickly on some real experiences with AgTech, just to highlight that adoption journey. I'm pointing to Brad Jones at Bungalla here. Some of you may know him, but he's basically gone down the path of making every single decision on farm backed by data he's collected through AgTech. So he's collecting data from his soil, from his yield, from his harvester. He's bringing it all from his financial zero data, and he's bringing that all together and he's making every single decision based on data. How powerful would that be, and how much more efficient will we be if we start doing that on farms across Western Australia? And he's also started using a Swarm Farm robot to do his spraying, which is exciting as well. Paraway Pastoral Company, their problem that they had was that they had to drive their cattle hours and hours to weigh them and understand what their average daily gain was. So they identified a technology called OptiWeigh, which gives them a real-life picture of how their animals are doing in the paddocks so that they don't have to drive them all that way. They know what their weights are, they know how much weight they're putting on, so how much they need to feed them accordingly. My own family farm, we are very much some of the laggards when it comes to technology. My dad's 73, but we've started using AgriWeb to do our individual animal management. You know, our problem was that we had whiteboards, chalk, pieces of paper with cow poo all over it. Like, honestly, it was a nightmare. So using things like this are really simple solutions to things that were taking up time and making issues. I'm happy to take questions later on and comments in the discussion, but I really wanted to say thank you again for having me, and I'd love to stay in touch with anyone who wants to have a chat. Thank you.
Brilliant. Some great examples there, Georgia. Thank you. Next up, our speaker is Ben Macnamara. This afternoon, Ben will be exploring how we can pave the way for the next generation of WA agriculture, drawing perspective from his leadership position as the Chief Executive Officer of the CBH Group, which he has held since July 2021. Previously, Ben was the Chief Operations Officer, from where he was responsible for leading CBH's world-class storage and handling, logistics and shipping services. Ben is leading the CBH Group in creating a sustainable future and returning value to West Australian growers. Before joining CBH, Ben worked for an investment advisory firm and an international professional services firm. Ben is a member of the Chartered Accountants Australia and is on the board of the Business Council of the Cooperative and Mutuals. Please welcome Ben.
Thanks very much, Tress.
Apologies, I didn't do your slide.
Okay, do we? No?
No, wrong way. There we go.
Okay,
Welcome, Ben.
fantastic. Thanks very much, Tress. Great to be here, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. And let me also take the opportunity just to acknowledge some of the presentations that have gone before me. They're fantastic, very inspiring, and thank you for that. Let me just start with our strategy, which I think is a really good link back in today's topic. I'm going to start with our purpose and our beneficiaries. So our purpose, as it states up there, is to sustainably create and return value for WA growers. And the word sustainably is really important because this actually looks through the generations. There's no quick wins in agriculture. We don't want any of those sugar hits, and therefore we want it to be sustainable. And the second aspect around our beneficiary is very much that we're focused on WA growers, both current and also future. And this is a really important aspect, I think, that we've focused on over the last couple of years. We see ourselves, board and management at CBH Group, as almost custodians of the asset. Very similar to the way growers see their land and their farming assets. And as a country kid with family on the farm, I think that's a really important aspect. When we were going through and thinking about our strategy a couple of years ago, we made it longer term. We wanted to think more about the future, and hence the reason why we've targeted 2033, which is the centenary of the CBH cooperative. We wanted to make it simple so that it could cascade through our business and link everything through. And on that basis, we came up with 3 strategic objectives, which we've got up there on the page. And the first one is to be able to handle an average crop of 22 million tonnes and to be able to outturn 70% of that in the front half of the year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that 22 million tonnes by 2033, but we think we could see peak crops of even up to 30 million tonnes, particularly if Tress continues to develop some of these new barley varieties. The 70% I'll touch on in a second as well. We also want to be able to market 50% of the West Australian crop into international markets, and this means we've got the people, the funding, the risk limits, and the capability to be able to buy and trade that crop into international markets. And the third aspect is to be able to hold a 15% market share in the FERT space to provide transparency to the growers of Western Australia on what we should be paying for fertiliser. On the right-hand side of this page, it's an important aspect. So 2033, about 10 years away, and we've broken that 10 years into 3 horizons. We're partway through the first one. But our goal is to be able to ship 3 million tonnes of grain per month by 2033. And that's a significant uplift on what we've done historically, which has been around the 1.6 million tonne mark. This year we're running at about 1.9. We've done 1 month at 2.2 million, which is slightly above that first horizon target of 2 million tonnes by 2024. We're then setting ourselves a target of 2.5 million tonnes by 2028 and that 3 million by 2033, which is critical to getting the value back into the Western Australian grain industry. So this is a little bit about the why. The 3 charts, I'll start with the one on the left. This is showing crop production. So the line is the annual crop production or crop receivables into the CBH network. The bars are our averages for the preceding period. And then you can see the magnitude of the increase over the last couple of years. So if I was talking to you 2 years ago, our crop would be, our biggest crop would have been 16.6. Our average was about 14.2. The last 2 have been 21 and roughly 23 million. So our average as I sit here today is just over 17 million tonnes, which is quite a remarkable effort by the growers of Western Australia, but it takes an entire industry to deliver these types of uplifts in this period of time, and some fortunate weather as well. The chart in the middle is showing our shipping, or average shipping per month for a 10-year window. This shows that we have a bias towards the front half of the year, and that really is because in the back half of the year, the Black Sea is harvesting, and generally they're moving into our key markets in Southeast Asia. What you can see here is as the crop sizes got bigger, more of that grain needs to get out in the front half of the year. And again, this is why we're targeting to get 70% of our grain out in the front half of the year to have that sprint capacity to be able to obtain premium pricing for growers. And that's what the chart on the right-hand side is demonstrating. So for the commoditised grains, in the front half of the year, they're roughly $25 higher in that period than they are in the back half of the year. And hence the reason why we want to continue to be able to provide the ability to be able to go in the front half of the year if the market is desirable. So to achieve that 2033 target of 3 million tonnes and to be able to achieve those strategic objectives, we've identified 3 strategic pillars, and these link incredibly well back to all of the discussion that we've had or you've heard from the other presenters before us. There's 3 pillars. We've got people, technology, and tonnes to customer. I'm going to talk a bit more about the people aspect in a second, but I'll touch on the other 2. So technology, at CBH, we think about this in 2 different buckets. One is the information technology, and the other bucket is the operational technology aspect. In the information area, there is a lot of data that we can capture, as you've heard before. Where we're focused at the moment is updating and upgrading our information backbone. So this is our SAP, our financial information, and also our trading platforms as well. This is to provide our people with better information at the right time to make better decisions and to get more out of the infrastructure. On the operational technology side, we've got a lot of work going into this space, and we've been doing a lot over a number of years. But some more recent examples are things like a proof of concept on autonomous vehicles on site. So today we run what we call an intra-siloed truck. That is basically just a semi doing the same pathway around a site, going from a bulkhead to a rail grid, so we can recharge our rail cells to then activate rail. We think this is perfectly suited to an automated solution, and as we find it more difficult to obtain labour in regional areas, this is going to be a necessity as we move forward. There's many other proof of concepts that we've got in the pipeline as well, and we'll continue to work our way through those. The tons to customer one is critical in terms of from an infrastructure and asset perspective. So a couple of key areas here is really setting ourselves up for 2033. You would have recently seen that we've made a large acquisition of rolling stock. This will see us nearly double our fleet, so we can enable getting more grain to port. This takes grain off road, puts it more onto rail, and provides us with more of that sprint capacity. We've also worked with government over the last 5 years to gain greater investment into our rail network and into some of the roads. From a rail perspective, this sees us upgrading our siding infrastructure. Good examples recently is out of Brookton, and we're in the midst of building a rail loading facility down in Broome Hill, which will be absolutely critical in closing the gap of getting more tonnes to a port to uplift from that roughly 1.9 to 3 million tonnes by 2033. Then we've obviously got to add storage at our upcountry sites as we continue to see this crop size increase. And then we start to move on to our ports, which is where that bottleneck starts to move as we invest in that infrastructure getting grain to our ports. This will see things like ship loaders and the like being increased as we move forward. From a people pillar perspective, this is an area of passion for me. I think we're seeing regional demographics change quite dramatically. We've got an ageing population in the regions, and we've also got a declining population in the regions. And so we've put a lot of work into how we think about the people pillar at CBH. Started out, we've refreshed our values. We're working through leadership development aspects. We've got fantastic people that live and reside in the regions. They've been with us for many years, and this is about investing in their capabilities so that as we move forward into the future, they're set up with the skills and capability to take us forward in this new world. The one I want to touch on is workforce planning as well. So one of the key things we've looked at is what does our workforce need to look like in 2033 based on the crop size and based on some of those other key assumptions. And that'll be really key in terms of how we accommodate them, where do they live, and so on and so forth. Just to close out, sustainability is a really critical aspect in the ag sector as well. We rolled our sustainability plan out in September last year, and I'll touch on a couple of key pillars within this. Firstly, around our markets. So our customers are continuing to make claims that they will reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And we represent their scope 3, and therefore they are looking all the way through the supply chain for better indicators on how they can obtain lower carbon grain and also sustainably certified grain. So in that regard, about 20% of our grain sales have been sustainably certified in this year. And I think we're going to continue to see this increase as we move forward. The other pillar I want to touch on is the environment aspect. We've set 2 targets. The first one is the scope 1 and 2. We want a 50% reduction by 2030 in greenhouse gas emissions, and by 2050 we want a net zero aspect. And we've got clear strategies in place to address those. You'll see that with the site to customer, this includes scope 1, 2 and 3 from site to our customer's location. I think the logistical aspects are a really critical element in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions for our customers. That, I'm going to leave it there. As others said, happy to take questions amongst the panel. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ben. All right, our final presenter for today is Nick Ayres. Nick grew up in Broome Hill in the Great Southern and studied agricultural science also at the University of Western Australia, which was a perfect foundation for Nick to pursue his passion in agriculture. Nick started his agronomy career at Elders as an agronomist in Geraldton after working a harvest job in Tarden. These days, Nick is a self-employed agronomist in the Midwest region of the wheat belt, servicing clients throughout the entire wheat belt. He has a passion for R&D and farming systems development, where he utilises his skills to develop and manage projects throughout the region and with his client base. The focus of Nick's presentation today is answering the big question: what is the next step change for dry land broadacre agriculture production? Since the advent of no-till, he believes we have seen significant productivity changes to our ag sector, which have been spearheaded by many of the current industry leaders, some of them present today, leaving the industry in a very different place to where it was when those same individuals began their careers. Nick strongly believes that tackling new constraints means new ideas and an eagerness to discover what these constraints could look like in the future. Please welcome Nick.
I have to say I am very grateful for this opportunity to talk about the young people of agriculture, where the future of this industry is going to go. And representing the youth of agriculture, I suppose I have to say that recently being a father of second child and often complaining about sore knees, it's a nice reminder that I do still fit that category. I suppose, firstly, I really want to address that I think everyone in this room can agree that agriculture is innately full of very passionate people. And the most powerful tool that any single person will have in their career is how passionate they are. That alone will get you a long way. And it can be intoxicating. If you are someone who's lucky enough to have genuine passion, everything else becomes very easy as you can literally taste the opportunity to make the world a better place. The second thing that I want to bring up, hold on, here we go, is a little bit more philosophical. And if I'm going to get you to ponder this for a moment, being a room full of scientifically minded people, if we keep learning how wrong we were, what does that say about everything we know now? If the modern evolution of science is driven by continually learning more and finding out how wrong we had it before, what does that actually say about where we are right now? In the next 8 minutes, I want to touch on what I believe will be the pillars of advancement of agriculture going forwards, and how the next generation and all generations of leaders beyond that will need to tackle it. How the current consortium of leaders have taken this industry from somewhere where it was to where it is now, and how they going to make sure that we have the tools to keep that trend going. So I want to start this roller coaster with the idea of knowledge. We're in a university campus. It's a good place to talk about knowledge. There's a lot of it around. You have, broadly speaking, 4 kinds of knowledge, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this before. We've got our known knowns. We've got our unknown knowns, the things you don't know that you actually do know. That's a good one, that one. We've got our known unknowns. That's important. But the big one for me is the unknown unknowns. Right? Right. So let's sort of digest this a little bit. That latter one being a very large pool of things we don't know, we don't actually know. Right? Now, I think I remember what the next slide is. As we learn, our known knowns will grow, and as they grow, our unknown unknowns will shrink at a much slower rate. That is actually quite an important piece to remember, you see, because one of the best depictions of this sort of analogy that I'm trying to allude to is what many of us would understand as the Dunning-Kruger effect. The knowledge curve, or, ignorance is bliss, ignorant arrogance. The less we know, the more likely we are to think we know more than we do. That's a good one too. So have a think about that. While we're sitting in a room full of people that are hungry to learn, and what that means for things we don't know, and as we learn more about knowing more. I believe this is the most important part of the picture when it comes to my next point. So this you can see, obviously, I'm sure you've all seen this curve, but I just want to bring it to everyone's attention again. We've got the Dunning-Kruger effect where you've got, this is how good you actually are, and this is how confident you are. You're a little bit good, you get real confident, and then suddenly you realise it's not so good anymore. And then this is why scientists often sitting up here, as farmers, often people get frustrated where the science errs on the side of caution a lot of the time. Because as we know, the more we know, the less we know. It's good. This is another good one to describe it. It's that scatter graph. This is sort of how my brain works. For any single point on that plot, you could have any sorts of variations to get pretty close to it. And I think that's a really good way to understand the people in the world that we live. Right, so this is where I come to my next point. Innovation, real innovation, stems from dabbling in this world of infinite possibilities, the unknown unknown, out of which unknown orders of magnitude of unknown possible outcomes could possibly exist, where true magic can occur. You see, where science makes impact or discoveries is largely in the world of the known unknowns. This is something quite interesting, and I think we should explore it some more. And herein lies the real question. Where will the next scientific areas evolve from? How are we going to keep delivering to science things to explore which we can't explain, but we need to? What I mean by this is, and I've got on my notes, ugly Venn diagrams, so hold on to your seats. We can think about this in a few ways, but here we've got our world of unknown unknowns. It's a very big pool of possibilities. And then here we've got our pool of known unknowns, where it's much smaller, but we dabble in that world of known unknowns through the use of innovation. We deliver into that pool, and then science goes, oh, great, I'm going to grab this little piece of magic and do something with it. And then we deliver our outcomes. It's a very streamlined approach, and I'm probably mostly focused and excited about this part in the middle. If we talk about our current scientific magic and the volume of works that's going on, and we compare that to our future potential scientific magics, that's a very large pool of opportunity. And this is a schematic that I think is very important to bear in mind when you're thinking about the future generation coming into a world of infinite possibilities. So innovation comes from the need to innovate and the right person being there at the right time, and the recognition of a problem and the desire to find a solution. Real innovation, which dabbles in these worlds of infinite possibilities, may even solve a problem that it didn't know was there. The motor car was not one single innovation, it was an amalgamation of innovations that all came together to produce a product that our world now relies on. In fact, our world would not function without it. Innovation drives scientific discovery, progress. In a world of capital realities, it can be difficult to share a piece of that knowledge pie with young hands, but how else do we ensure that we are maintaining an environment to inspire innovation, collaboration and continuous succession? It doesn't matter what part of industry you're in or your role you play to keep these cogs in motion. Without the network of support offered by people around us, an idea is simply just that, an idea. We can all recall a point in our lives where we had to lean on someone around us to turn an idea into a reality. You see, the leaders of the past have managed to get this industry into a position unimaginable by building and following their path. They inherited something that was working, albeit a bit of 100 mile an hour tape and some wire was holding it together, but they found the problems that were left of them and they fixed them. They have built something to be proud of and a machine that will not be slowing down anytime soon. As we expand our knowledge and this path changes, as does our industry, how do we ensure the future is equally productive? Throughout the entirety of history, we have failed to be there. So I'm rather confident that we are still far from the pinnacle of agricultural production. How do we ensure that every single person in the industry or entering the industry has the same feeling of opportunity the generation before them had? How do we ensure that our path is not being laid by those bleary-eyed from walking the path to get here? It might not be 160 km/h tape and wire anymore. We've got hose clamps and cable ties these days. But it's on us to find out what the issues are that will define our careers and how badly do we want to solve them. It's on us to be hungry for knowledge. You see, succession can be done poorly. And I'm sure there's lots of people in this room that have lived that firsthand. But it should be about opportunity, about a continuity of legacy. You see, for me, I'm proud of all the cool things that I get to do in industry, of real value, real contribution. Some of these things may have never been done before, but that opportunity does not lay solely on my shoulders. That is laying on the shoulders of all those that have built the path for me to get here. And I'm only building a new path for the next generation when I'm done. So what does this actually mean? As an industry evolves and we learn at an ever-increasing rate, how do we ensure that everything we do is ready to roll in handover to the next generation? If learning is exponential and the pit of unknown unknowns is infinite, we never really change where we sit on that learning curve. All we do is zoom out and change the log base. The single biggest contribution we can have to our industry is the continual inspiration of true passion within the next generation, making sure the doors of infinite possibilities remain open at all times and ever possible. When it comes time to hand over, tired cynicism does not dampen the view of reality of opportunity within the industry. The notion that with how much we don't know, anything is possible and there is a world of opportunity out there to go find it and contribute to a better world. As we continue to learn how much we don't yet know, we inspire those problem solvers of tomorrow to realise the opportunities that lie within this great industry. So for those of you sitting here reflecting on your careers gone and achievements, how will you supply the prodigy of the future to take your learnings and your contributions to the next level? And for the rest of us that are standing here eager to go, how do we ensure that we have an appetite to grab it and run? There you go.
Ooh, some deep thinking there. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so that wraps for our presentations, and the next part of our program is the panel discussion. So I'd now like to invite all of the presenters to come and take a seat at the front here, please. And while they're doing that, I am actually going to introduce the panel facilitator, also my fellow member of the Industry Advisory Board, Belinda Eastough. So come on up, folks, please, while we're doing that. So Belinda commenced work at DPIRD in 1989, first in the South Perth Plant Pathology program, then moved to Geraldton as an extension officer. After 7 years at DPIRD, Belinda worked as an agriculture consultant for agrarian management for 4 years. Belinda has been in her current role as a part-time agronomist for Elders in Geraldton for 21 years and is also a director with her husband in her farm business at UNA, which involves both cropping and stock. Over to you, Belinda. My job is done.
Thank you very much, Tress, and thank you to everyone for coming today. So we'll launch into the questions. We have 2 roving mics, one each side. We've already got a couple of questions on the boil anyway, so I'll start with those. The first one has come from the audience and it's for Georgia. Thanks. So the question is, Georgia, when we talk about ag tech in WA, is there any chance for genetically modified ag tech? Do you think one day in the future GM crops will be the next generation of WA agriculture?
Thanks for the question. Really, really interesting. Genetic modification is already pretty common out in the field. As you know, there's lots of GM crops out there that are already being used. So I do think that this is something that is becoming commonplace. But I spoke about the role of education, and I've touched on some virtual reality sort of tours, and I do think that education and breaking down the country-city divide and building confidence in our products that we produce and educating consumers is a real key to this. And as industry members, we each and all of us can play a role in achieving that, and helping with that education hurdle. Social media, definitely a fantastic tool. Using our voices, talking, having conversations, making sure people are aware of what these things are is a vital step. And I think schools and education programs can also play a role here too at improving understanding of the products that we consume. But I look at my little nephews that are 8, 10, and a little niece that's 13, and they're wanting to work in agriculture, and I look at their little faces when I'm showing them some of the ag tech that I'm involved with through my work, and they're so excited that I know that they will embrace this and continue to use technology and innovations like GM going forward, and they will, with their unique skills, help break down that barrier as well.
Okay, thank you. The second question is for Sally. How would you differentiate the agri-career pathway from a university and an agricultural college? Is one better than the other on purpose?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think they kind of go together. I think there's a really clear link between a pathway from our colleges into a range of options for further training and development. You could see from our data that there's a number of kids going into apprenticeships, there's a number of kids going straight into employment, but that doesn't mean that their training and development doesn't stop or that they might go to university later on. I think we do have quite a good success stories of pathways of kids who've gone from ag colleges and got a grounding. I always say we're not turning out people who know everything about agriculture from a school in the same way that we don't expect our schools to be producing doctors and lawyers. There is further training required, but what we try and do is give them a really good grounding and base on which they can then build on with university. So I see them as complementary, really.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Are there any other questions from the audience? Yes, a chap in the middle.
Nearly all the speakers up until the last one, Nick, put technology and adaptation as the kind of key point. And I just wanted, I'm sure most people will understand that technology is only as good as the science which underpins it. And I'm just wondering where the science is going to come from. So we heard from Trevor that we'd like to put more money into universities, but that was largely, according to him, to promote postgraduate research, which is a good thing. But a lot of those postgraduates doing the research will be international students, and they won't be sticking around to help out in the future. The numbers going through our universities are pretty small. Sally talked about 9% from the agricultural colleges. I just wonder how we're going to get the next generation to come along to serve the next generation agriculture. Is it going to be from schools? Sally might like to comment on the new curricula in the schools. She might like to comment on primed and whether that's going to help. We've got, I think, 4 and a bit graduates from the agricultural faculty at UWA on our panel. Perhaps they'd like to talk about how they see agricultural scientists as being engendered in our community, but I really think that coordinated training, strategic training is going to be a major and key issue. I'd be interested in the comments on that.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Who would like to tackle that one first? You're closest, Nick, so you might like to have a go at that one.
That's very kind. I actually think that's a really good question. One of the points I tried to get across was, I think a lot about this handover, moving on to the next generation, is about that inspiration, making sure that people coming in to the scene know and realise that those opportunities that exist, that world of unknown unknowns is real. I think one of the main issues that I, as a person who's experienced, I suppose, coming to an industry relatively fresh, there's a lot of capital realities in the world, in the whole world, that will inhibit anyone trying to give someone else a leg up. And breaking down some of those barriers is probably the single most important thing that's to this industry, to make sure that we are getting more minds into the industry from the outside, because stopping minds from the outside coming into the industry will stop the industry from progressing in directions that it doesn't already know about.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I might just also handball that same question to Trevor. So how do we stop that brain drain, and how do we keep agriculture going forward in the state with regards to the people?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'm a product of the 80s, and I wanted to be a bond trader, but I wasn't as smart as Ben, so I didn't end up doing the accounting. So look, you've got to create the ecosystem. You've got to make it exciting. Not everyone wants to be an agronomist and go and kick the dirt. So you've got to show that there's pathways, and it's got to be a financial career there. And so part of what I was talking about is make it look big and exciting, and then there's the jobs and the careers, and that'll attract people. You can go to all the schools you like and bang the drum and say you should do biology, you should do chemistry, you should do physics, should be maths, but the numbers are dropping down. We know that. So how do you attract people in a very sophisticated world where these kids are looking at career options very early on? Ultimately, we're competing against the mining industry, against the health sector, against the commercial commerce sector. We've got to show we've got the flexibility and the job career paths that are vastly more interesting than being in the mining. And if you're a bit green, it's sustainable. If you want to be progressive, it's a good culture mix. We're competing, and we actually have to sell the story. But, you've got to have a market there. You've got to have jobs. We do have jobs, but we haven't been good at really building on it.
Thank you, Trevor. Yes, Ross?
Yeah, just a comment and then a question maybe. To date, I think in the discussion, a lot of the innovation has been synonymous with the introduction of greater agricultural technology. And I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that there is also benefit from innovation in other spheres, such as policy innovation. Tress Walmsley, for example, with endpoint royalties. That's an example of a policy innovation that's delivered great benefit to the West Australian farmer. So I guess I'm saying be careful to not narrow the definition of innovation solely to science-based gadgets and widgets. And so that then comes to my question, which is, what are the other sorts of innovations that you think are going to drive agriculture in coming decades, particularly in the sphere of social, of workforce, policy? What are the innovations other than technical gadgetry innovations that are going to deliver benefit? Is it in education? Is it in workforce planning? Is it making the social environment of being a farmer more attractive? What are some of the innovations that will deliver benefits in those areas?
Okay, I might just handball that one to Ben because he was looking a little bit relaxed. So a couple of things he mentioned in his presentation were sustainability, the sustainability area, and also the emissions area, and you're going to need pretty good people in those areas. So what sort of innovation are you? They're fairly innovative areas, so maybe you might like to comment on how you're going to go forward with regards to CBH.
Yeah, it's a very broad topic, Ross, and you can go anywhere with this. Maybe I'll go from where we were discussing just with a people perspective. I think from an ag perspective, we've very much looked internally for people coming through the industry. So it's generally been from people who are already involved in agriculture, so country people. I think as the population reduces, we need to start to change our focus and look about how do we encourage people from city and big regional centres to get more involved in agriculture. And I think that's about starting to express that you can be involved in ag, notwithstanding the capital impost of going and buying a farm, but you can be involved whether it's a grain trader, whether it's an agronomist, whether it's in ag tech, whether it's in education, all of these types of roles. And I think it's a much broader sector than just being, sorry to put it this way, just on the land as a farmer. So I think that's a really important aspect. If we talk about from an innovation perspective, I think some of the pieces that we've learned is around being a fast follower rather than sort of being on the leading or cutting edge of it. And the best example I can give of that is some of the stuff we're doing on our autonomous trucking solution that we're talking about. So recently, 3 weeks ago, we were in the US at a conference hosted by Hexagon. Hexagon's focus has really been on the mining sector, but that technology lends itself incredibly well to agriculture, as I outlined before. It's about how do we capture some of that, bring it into the ag sector and deploy it. It's a fairly low risk solution. Ultimately, it's going to be, as we move forward, we're going to look at how do we increase production and drive efficiencies through the ag sector. And so for us, really the key piece is how do we drive the efficiencies in our network in a world where we see a declining population being able to work in some of these regional areas. Hence the reason why we go to automation on some of these repetitive tasks, and that's where we'll continue to focus our efforts. Hopefully that
just to
gets
pick up on that, I also think we need to remember innovation's not just about the technical gadgets. Innovation's a mindset. And I think for us from education, getting our kids to be critical thinkers. You know, we don't need people doing those mindless tasks. We're finding things that can do it, but we need the brains who are going to drive that.
Yep.
The other point I want to make is that most kids are going to have probably 5 different careers in their lifetime now. The day of going from school to university and studying ag science and then going and becoming a researcher for the rest of your career is not the pattern that we're seeing and predicting that's coming through. And I think the more that we can get kids coming into ag who are bringing skills from mining, from robotics, from economics, from media, that we're starting to build a bigger diversity of skill set into our, and there's strength in diversity, and we all know the data that shows that. The last point I want to make is that you don't have to have a full university degree to be an entrepreneur and an innovator. You know, I've got way more university degrees than my husband, but I tell you, the things that he does on farm and the science that I see him applying every day in the paddock is phenomenal. And I think that that's the same as most people. So I think, don't think that if you don't have those formal qualifications that therefore, you know, I think we've got to be lifelong learners, and I think we're moving into a path of more what we call like that micro-credential type learning, where you're getting in short, sharp and pulling bits from different areas to make up your learning. And I think it's exciting.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Did you want to add a comment there, Fiona?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think there are some innovations that we could look at in things like farm succession planning, you know, improve sort of farm business models, marketing, those kind of things. Unfortunately, I feel like keeping people or attracting people to regional areas is sort of comes down to a matter of infrastructure and facilities that you can provide. Many towns don't have a childcare centre. It's pretty critical to attract young families to come and work for CBH or work on farms, investment in primary schools, and the education, particularly in secondary education. There is a real drain of people from regional areas when their children hit high school, because if they can't afford boarding school and they want to send them to top Perth schools, they move to Perth, and seeing lots of people either selling up or leasing, and we're losing those farm managers, we're losing that IP from our regional communities. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from the floor? Thanks, Ben.
Just a sort of a follow-up one, but it's probably a bit of a comment. That I've wondered often about agriculture, whether it's actually seen as a welcoming industry. And look, it is a welcoming industry, having worked in it for some time, but I'd be interested in the views of others about, on the panel, whether we do enough to have it being seen as a welcoming industry, to want to go and join, particularly for those kids who are from the city and don't really know that it is it's an industry that you should feel welcome for. I think people get put off by it because not only they don't understand it, but I've got this sense that it's perhaps not welcome like in some instances the mining industry is.
Yes, that's a perfect question for you, Trevor.
That's a good question. Let's face it, it's a you go out to the wheat belt and what do you see? You see a lot of old white-style, middle-aged, blokes like me, fifth generation. What are my members, 1,000 members? What are they? They're not very diverse. And I think one of the mining industry has been much more sophisticated in actually embracing a more diverse culture. CBH is doing a really good job in this in terms of attracting students to come out. One of the great things we have is the university system is attracting international students. We need to get those students out because that helps mix that diversity up. But you're quite correct. It is, it's intimidating, particularly from the farm sector. Different in your world where you're in the sort of corporate Perth-based world. But, changing perception of the industry is incredibly important. And just going back to the point Ross made about policy innovation, absolutely. And what did I talk about? Policy innovation. 16 years in government, very unsophisticated. All too often you have ministers for agriculture who come out of agriculture. You actually need some people to shake it up. And if you look at some of our best ministers for agriculture, they actually have not, state and federal, have not come out of the industry.
Can I jump in there as well?
Yes.
I think it's a good question. I think a couple of things come to mind. When we're recruiting sort of younger people today, I think we do actually have a competitive advantage over the mining industry. So I've sat in interviews where junior people have asked around purpose. From a CBH perspective, they feel connected to that. Then they go into sustainability and they feel agriculture is a far more sustainable industry than digging things out of the ground. And so I've definitely found people choosing to work in our business as opposed to in a mining company because of that. And I think that's something that we should celebrate a bit more. I think, Trevor, using your point on the mining industry, CME is fantastic. Beck Tompkinson's already doing a great job with some of the advertisements on TV. They do it as an industry. You would have seen some of our advertising for Harvest Casuals, and I can see the CSBP advertising as well. I think we put a more humanistic touch on it. I think that works. I think the other point that I would make is every year we are recruiting about 2,000 people to work on the bins during harvest. And the amount of times that I have a conversation with someone in Perth around the fact that they worked on the bins and it was a rite of passage, I've lost count. And they see that as a really important piece. And I think from an ag industry perspective, it's a perfect opportunity to leverage, you've got those people in the country, we treat them right, and then we try and get them to stick. Yep.
I'll just make a comment from, we have a lot of international students through our school, and I guess my experience is particularly recently, I lost track of how many emails I've had from students that are finishing up that they just want to stay, that they don't want to go back. They really love what they've been researching. They want a job, in this industry in Western Australia, and I think that's really encouraging. I've found our farmers to be really welcoming of international students, of international workers. We have lots of international workers coming through our farms that ultimately end up staying because they love Western Australia and the lifestyle. So I think we do a pretty good job, but I do take your point that it can be because of the demographic. It can be intimidating, and there's probably some things that the industry could work on.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. There was another question in the front here.
Hi, my name's Eric. I come from cattle and I'm now in food recycling and sustainability. So on carbon credits and sustainability, I'm very curious to see how you guys see it as, is it a competitive advantage or competitive necessity? And then who pays for it? Will it be the consumer, the wholesaler, retailer, the primary producer? And will this change depending on the market, as in internal, domestic, export, export to different nations, and so on? Thank you.
Who would like that question?
Yep, good question. I think what we're finding with our customers, so whether it's Nestle, Mars, any of the big food players around the world, they're making statements that they're going to be carbon neutral by a certain date, and on that basis, it has to go back through the supply chain, and they're only going to be able to source their grain from a location that can actually meet that requirement. So you can look at it in two ways. Are you going to get a premium, or is it just literally a ticket to the game? With our ISCC, we've certainly been able to generate a premium for canola going into Europe. But again, I think as we see all of this converge, it essentially will become a ticket to the game. Now, in Western Australia, I think we're incredibly well placed to be able to leverage this. There are some challenges, I think. So we're looking at mining companies buying up land to obtain or reforest it for carbon credits. That's certainly something that we'll continue to watch closely, and I think there's a lot more work that needs to go into that area to educate ourselves and growers.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Just to add to that, from my perspective in the ag tech sort of cattle livestock realm, I see it as being a competitive advantage and an opportunity for agriculture to become part of the solution. I think I mentioned that before, and I think that is a very exciting opportunity. It does have a number of challenges though, because yes, as you mentioned, we don't really want the farmers to pay for it, but farmers have been paying for improvements in genetics and new technology on farm for many, 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 many years. And we're used to doing this, and we only do it when we see that competitive advantage and opportunity to make profits and be very smart in the way that we're marketing our products. Now, I know farmers that are going carbon neutral, and they're doing this because they are really switched on it and they're marketing their products accordingly. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity. And if in agriculture we can move towards having more premium protein, versus the alternative proteins, for example, I think that's a really exciting opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. While you're there, I've got another question for you. This one is from Daniel Kidd from GGA. You mentioned ag tech startups need our help. Should the ag influence start earlier rather than retrofitting engineering ideas to agriculture? Are there opportunities for ag to drive the innovation solutions we need?
That is a wonderful question, and my first response is, do you have an idea that you want to go and make a startup with? Because we'd love there are avenues to take ideas as farmers and researchers. There's many avenues where you can take your idea and go out and make a startup yourself. But it's a difficult one because we do want to encourage new skills and new expertise into agriculture, and coming from engineering, computer science and all those other plants and food science and all those sorts of areas is really important in order to bring those new perspectives and expertise in. So we want a bit of both. We want startups that are coming from those different realms, but we do want startups to come from the farmers and from the researchers, and there are avenues for both. And yeah, I think I've worked with farmers that are having their own startups, and it's an exciting area. And look, it's definitely one I'd be happy to chat about if anyone has any ideas and does know someone who's got an idea and they want to commercialise it.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. Another question in the middle there.
I'm Graham Martin from UWA. I want to go back to this concept of getting young people interested in agriculture. There've been a couple of projects, several projects over the years that have tried to engage learning and teaching processes in schools with farmers and industry and so forth. Primed was one. I think Kids to Farms is another one. Do we have any feeling for whether they've worked and whether they've left a legacy that actually is going to help us to improve the situation with respect to broadening interest?
That's got your name on it, Sally.
It sure does. Really good question, and I think we really do have, there's a lot of misinformation about agriculture as a career out there amongst our kids, but more importantly, amongst our parents. And parents are actually the biggest influence on a child's career pathway coming out of school. So one of the things that we've done with the Education Department is we've been doing these career conversations where we're not just going out and doing career information to kids, we're now actually running career sessions for the parents, because we've noticed that, all parents seem to think that their kid needs to be a lawyer, an engineer or a doctor is what they will aspire to. I think during COVID, agriculture really became a career that was stable and was seen as important. So I think we can do it better, but I think there's some shifts coming. I don't necessarily think it's the job of one agency to do it, or a program is really going to shift a lot of it. I think those programs create the exposure. But I think what we need as an industry very broadly is to be making sure that we are getting out the stories about the good things in agriculture. I think, touching on what Ben raised, that a lot of kids today are very savvy and caring about the environment. They want to make a difference. They want to do something that helps the world and feeds the world. And I think agriculture, we need to link those kind of values that we're seeing coming through in our young people with career pathways. I don't have the answer of how best to do that, but I think it's something we all need to do. And just being mindful of making sure that we are, even touching on, are we welcoming people into the industry? How are we welcoming people who are culturally diverse, who might not have come through that traditional farm pathway? I mean, the farming community is a small community in WA. Everyone knows everyone. And you look at the networks that are created and the way that opportunity and privilege is enabled for people who are already within that bubble. And I look at my own kids who've grown up with that and how they've been very easily able to have agriculture careers in a way that people who might be coming from the city might not. And I mean, I still see a lot of chauvinism in farming, and I experience it myself regularly. I think it's getting better, but it is still definitely there. It's also about, how are we making sure that the people we have in our industry are trying to broaden and include more people.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Had another question. Did you have another question here? And then you, Tress.
Yes, I have a question I want to ask Trevor and Fiona, because you two mentioned the government, the WA state will introduce more international students in agriculture area, and they more like stay at WA. But actually, as an international student graduate at UWA and also as a staff working in Institute of Agriculture, I want to say actually the situation not like you think. As the tuition fee in UWA is more than 40,000 per year, and also for 2 years to get the graduate visa to work here, and they are hardly to find the job in Western Australia because the depart not allowed the international student to find the job which more than level 3 and level 4. They only can find a job like level 1 or level 2 as casual, and then they will find a job as in regional area for 1 year contract or 2 year contract. As they get the PR visa, they will quit this agricultural industry and go another area because they dislike the regional area.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to answer that one, Fiona, about how we retain international students?
I'll have a bit of a crack at that. As I understand, the problem is fixed term contracts, and yet contracts are short, and that is not providing the incentive. Yeah, it's a complicated. I'm not an expert on the visa employment system, but I myself have been on short term contracts for probably 10 years. And it's a challenge, you get nearly to the end of it, you've got 1 month left on your contract and you haven't got, something lined up, and that's stressful for me, and I'm a permanent resident, so I can only imagine how stressful that is for international students. And I absolutely agree that it would be really great to see the responsible government departments try and tidy that up, and hopefully some of the industry advocacy groups like grain growers could perhaps address some of those visa type issues with the federal government. That would, potentially certainly help in retaining some of our international graduates who are fantastic students and will be a fantastic asset for the industry.
Yeah, it still gets back to the crux of retaining good people in the industry. or how do we do it more effectively? Tress, your question, please.
A topic that hasn't come up today is the importance of like early career professional development and mentoring. So like I was a beneficiary of coming through the department in the 80s and 90s where they were investing a lot in, you know, the graduate program and things like that. We don't necessarily have that so much now. There's things that you can do mid-career and later career like nutfields and things, but I think there's an opportunity for us as an industry to do something collectively around how we actually, you know, set up a more formal type of early career training program. Do you have a comment on that?
Who would like to answer? Well, as Nick, as someone that came straight out of the university system straight into a job, you didn't have the luxury of going through the department like Tress and I did, and we were trained and facilitated to death. Nick, how did you find it coming out as a graduate and just launching straight into it? And what do you think would have, I mean, I know you went through the elder system, but, you know, there's, like Tress has got a point, it's pretty hard coming straight out of uni, straight into it. You're expected to give advice to growers or whatever. Whereas in the department, we went through this lovely program, and probably half the people in the room went through this magnificent training program over a couple of years. So with regards to how you found it, Nick, and what would you do differently, or what do you think the industry should do differently?
That's a big question. Bit of context, everyone. Belinda was my mentor, so I've got to be honest.
Right.
What do I think there's a lot of things to unpack with that. When I left university 8 years ago, I went for a role at the department. And if you haven't noticed, I'm not someone who likes to cross my T's and dot my I's. And that is a big deal at an institute like that. And not to say that the outcomes have been any different at all, but what I mean is, as an industry, we have to be a lot more welcoming of people of different backgrounds and personalities, and really what we're chasing is their personality. Does this person have the potential to contribute to this industry? Because that's really what is the value of any individual. And I was lucky enough to go through a system where I had mentors and people to guide me in a direction that I could then decide what I thought was valuable. But how do we make sure that those people are given the opportunity to have that direction given to them? I don't think I have an answer. You've been around longer than me, Belinda. Did it work for you?
Well, I just jump in. I mean, universities.
Thanks, Fiona.
Yeah, well, universities, you're just seeing actually an increased number of mentoring programs through universities, but they do seem to be more around how to be an academic. And, you know, it would cover off on things around collaboration and collegiality and, you know, those kind of things. But my knowledge of those and experience with those programs is that it is mostly sort of around academic targets. And it's a good point. It's a good suggestion is perhaps to broaden those types of mentoring programs to include perhaps industry mentors, farming mentors, to really, I just feel so privileged and lucky to be part of a farming community and have access to all these farmers, one at my kitchen table, who I can just bounce ideas off. And, you know, it's a very fortunate position, and it would be really great if other early career researchers, particularly international students, could have those same opportunities. I think that would really add a lot of richness to their experience and also to their research.
Okay, we'll just take one last question from the floor because...
Doug Hall, Industry Development Specialist. I just would like to make an observation / recommendation, and sort of picking up on Ross's point about the broader context here. I think what we need is a system or a framework to provide coordination for things like innovation, research, employment. But it needs, most importantly, to be a framework that's not imposed from above, it comes from industry. And I think if you look at the really leading edge industries in the world today, like pharmaceuticals, computers, even cars. They all adopt a framework which essentially came from two Americans, Deming and Duran. Failed to get traction in America. They went to Japan, and that's why Japan was so successful after the war, because they adopted research in businesses and through supply chains. So you've got things like lean manufacturing, continual improvement, and so forth. But most importantly, it's got to come from industry, and even more important than that, it's got to come from supply chains. So the more supply chains adopt those sorts of in-house research, and we've heard some examples of that today. So data-driven, identify what your priorities are. That's when the researchers have got a message. Well, this is an industry priority. Let's spend our limited resources, that's time, people and money, addressing those issues. And it's going to require a bit of a change in the way researchers view their place in the world too. They need to become more supplying services to industry, businesses and supply chains than the other way around, which has historically been the tradition. Thanks.
Thank you. Do you want someone to address that? Yeah, because I think Georgia might be quite a good person to address that one with regards to, she came out of the uni and went straight into industry.
It's amazing what you can find when you start to dig and look for different avenues and pathways. Looking at the startup sort of world, pre-incubator, incubator programs, like there's so much out there in terms of fostering ideas and helping move us forward. From our own professional development point of view, work-life experience, internships, all these sorts of things, and having mentors was definitely an area, but I don't think I've addressed your comment at all, but anyone else want to have a stab?
I'll have a go. Doug's a big thinker in this area. I'll give you two examples. I touched on it very briefly. One was venture capital in the US. If you look at all the stats, all the graphs, it all kicks off in 1979. Why? Because the US federal government changed the tax laws to allow pension funds to invest in that, and it just exploded out of the blocks. And the other example is managed investment schemes in the 80s and 90s in Australia. Vast amounts of misallocation, as Ross would know, but it did kickstart and put a lot of emphasis on agriculture. We got a wine industry as a result, and other sectors. Doug's right. Don't impose it from the top. It's like my views. You want misallocation, get government writing checks. You incentivise, the CBHs and the CSBPs and everyone else in the supply chain to go and solve their problem, their unknown unknowns or whatever it is, and you just dangle the tax deductions, accelerated depreciation in front of Ben and his finance people and the other Ben, and you stand out of the road as you get run down by the mob. And that's the way to do it. And we don't have to have the answers. We just have to turn the policy lever and get the right one. And the government can take risk in this space and see what we're capable of, because the Israelis took risks and they've absolutely smashed agriculture, ag tech, innovation. And just one last number, WA turns over around 10 billion farm gate value on agricultural production, so does Israel. And imagine the average size of their farm, but value add. And big upsides, value add. But, they're big on science. So, it can be done, just needs some push the button.
That's a really good example of, it gets back to your policy question, Ross, how you can change policy to encourage investment. There's another question up the back. Sorry, yep. Oh, sorry, I've just, Phil's been waiting patiently right up the back.
Some of us have daughters, and you've got a huge asset which needs to be broken up. So the impact of the increase in land prices, I think, is deleterious. Certainly for the structure of the family farm, corporate farms, will not be farmed. But if you're interested, and with the opportunities in agriculture
services to those on the land, because it's harder and harder for new people to come in, just the expense of it. And we've got to remember that 50 or 60 roughly each year are leaving the land, leaving the farm. But I'm interested in the impact you might see on this huge increase in land prices in terms of what's being talked about.
Okay, thank you, Philip. That would be a great one for you, Fiona, because it has certainly changed the fabric of our communities, the increase in land prices that we've seen in small communities.
Yes, you're right. Yep. So yeah, there has been a large increase in land prices, and I guess as I alluded to in my presentation, I think that I can only really sort of speak anecdotally. What we've seen in our area is farmers, families that were sitting on the fence, thinking, should I keep going? Should I not? This is a bit stressful, or it's not for me, or the kids are off to boarding school. What's the point? It's high stress. Like, it really takes a toll. Those people were really sold up or leased out, with, seeing more leasing out of land. So I guess it's losing all of that knowledge from the industry is a concern, an interesting thing for me. There's so much of a farm that's just lived knowledge, and for someone, it's hard to get that knowledge from some of the precision ag type, the imagery, the remote sensing, and those sorts of things. You just got to be there to know what some of the issues are. So I see that as probably an issue. But I guess in terms of our ability to be more productive and more profitable, perhaps it's a good thing. We're able to potentially lend more money to invest in new technology that makes us more efficient. So that's probably a good thing for the industry in terms of producing more output.
Okay, thank you.
Can
Trevor?
Quick crack at this. Ross has been writing on this for 30 years.
Yeah.
So he'll probably pull apart my quick stats. I remember it was 16,000 farmers in the wheat belt when I was a kid in the early 70s. There's 2,700 grain growers, plus or minus. Yeah. Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, 700 producing 70% of the grain. That's cranking up. Look, it's all over. The chances, we're losing 3% of farm businesses a year in the Eastern Wheat Belt. Go out to the Eastern Wheat Belt. The corporates are coming in. The chances are we're out there, we're fourth, fifth, generation 6. The chances of running another 3, 4, 5 generations of being able to hand the baby, the bathwater, over to the son. Oh, sorry, it's no longer to the son. It's to the son and daughter, because you've got to divvy it up without a court case. The only option the smart farmers are doing is you package it up and you leave the structure and the trust in place. But the brutal reality is this is just going to speed up. We're going to get vastly bigger farms because the gear and the ag tech and the systems to run it. And those family farms are going to, it's a thing of the past. So, you just can't afford to have a capital base of what my average member is worth $25 million now. And that's just going up. So, I don't know, Ben?
Well, there's a lot that goes through my mind on this as well. I think, we're going to find out a lot around the serviceability of some of that debt given interest rates as we move forward. I think growers are acutely aware of the efficiency gains they need. Equipment prices have gone up dramatically, so you need more hectares to be able to gain that leverage on the fixed cost base to drive those efficiencies to ensure you're profitable. Clearly, the yields and grain prices over the last couple of years have certainly assisted with pushing land values up. But on the flip side, you talk to many growers from the East Coast, and we're starting to see more people investing in Western Australia because our land values, notwithstanding our yields, are lower. Our land values are a lot lower than the East Coast and other parts around the world. So, there's lots of pros and cons to it, I think. There'll be a lot to play out in the next couple of years, though, particularly depending on the vagaries of the season.
Oh, just going that one. Oh, I'll just take this one.
yeah.
Sorry, thank you, Ben. I'll just take this question here.
Yeah, Rob Wilson, not a question but a comment that about a pathway into agriculture that really doesn't get talked about, and probably not in these sort of forums, and that's the contribution that agriculture societies and their ag shows and then their involvement. Now, there's 580 ag shows held in Australia every year. Some of them, Ben, are now over 200 years old. So Hobart and Sydney reached 200, and there's a number of now well over 100 years. But within that operation are an enormous amount of young competitions, young judges and paraders, rural ambassadors, young farmers challenges, and in WA, our farm skills. This brings young people through a local, a zone, a state, and a national competition working in these areas. And it's not just livestock, we've just introduced soils and grains into the competitions as well. Those people, because they gain such a lot of experience and confidence in being involved in competitions, and they are exposed to all areas of industry, they stay in the industry. And it's just a very important pathway, probably one of the best kept secrets in agriculture in Australia.
But I think a Royal Agricultural Society, it's a really good opportunity to showcase agriculture in cities, because it's a really, really good opportunity for us all to get involved in the shows, especially when they're held in cities, to showcase our industry is a great place to work. And I think we'll just take one last question over here. Thank you.
Very good evening, everyone. I'm a bit nervous to ask, but from the past 4 years, I have been working at the ground level for the small farmers. I met even some farmers in Australia as well, in the farm markets as well. And my target of work is only small farmers. What I have noticed that even whether it's India or it's in Australia, the farmers, the small farmers, are still suffering. Both governments are doing well to upliftment for the farmers, but at the ground level, the condition for the small farmers are still same. They are not profitable. They are not known about the emerging technologies what we have. So my answer is how we can target the small farm. My question is how we can target the small farmers. Is it the same condition in India and the same condition are farmed in Australia? The small farmers are the old people. They don't know about the technology, and they're on the very small lands, and their children are fighting to divide the land and to sell them and everything. So I'm coming from India just to answer these questions, how we can save the small farmers. Anyone can answer me this, how we can target them, how can we help them to save our small farmers? Because food security is, I think, the biggest issue for us, especially for our developing countries like India, from where I belong.
Okay, that's a beautiful question for you, Trevor.
It's really biggest problem.
How do we keep smaller growers in the industry, or do we?
Small farmers, actually.
Well, the brutal reality is food security, bigger is better. You know, in terms of production and efficiency. Farming's great. You know, I grew up on a farm. It's been divvied up, got a bit of land left, but I'm still involved in agriculture. I'm in ag policy. We've been talking all afternoon about the pathways and the opportunity. You don't have to be a farmer. You don't to be involved in agriculture. There's a whole range and it's exploding around us. So I think we need to get away from keeping people on the land. I think we need to talk about the opportunities, whether it's in India or Indonesia or Australia. You don't have to be standing on the dirt with fixing the tractor or, planting or growing stuff to be involved in agriculture. It's brutal, it's unpleasant, but this university was one of the very first, back in the 60s and 70s with some of the ag economists who were basically saying, get big or get out. And there is nothing wrong with that. So we don't need, I don't know, what's the, 300, 200 million for small farmers in India. It's brutal, but there is a pathway. There's life outside of being on the land and still being involved in agriculture.
So you think there's no place for small farmers?
Huge opportunities for horticulture. I set up a horticultural operation from scratch, 70 acres, grew, second biggest stone fruit grower, planted 31,000 trees and got blown out of the water by Chile, free trade agreements. There is opportunities, but you've got to be really clever and really niche, but that's no different to being involved in ag tech, starting any other business. There is opportunities, but, you know, unfortunately, efficiencies, wine, horticulture, scale matters.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. And on a positive note, we're going to go through around each panel member, and in 5 short words, that'll be interesting. I've got the same question. So we'll start with you, Fiona. In a nutshell, what do we need to enable more young people to be an active participant in the future of WA agriculture? No, it doesn't have to be 5 words. That was just.
What was it? Sorry, read the question.
We're solutions based here. Okay. In a nutshell, what do we need to do to enable more young people to be an active participant in the future of agriculture?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's okay. I think we're already doing lots of really good things. I think that things like, I absolutely agree with the CBH's getting young kids onto the bins is a really great way to get kids, you know, into agriculture and get them, you know, to have a taste for it. Perhaps I'd probably like to see more things around more collaboration with, say, like the ag colleges, with the farmers and the ag colleges, and know a bit more about, as a farmer, how do I access an ag college graduate? How do I sort of advertise my position to that organisation? How do I tap into that resource? So perhaps things like internships or graduate programs. I'm not sure if any farmer has the appetite for a traineeship, but things like that where we can have graduates from universities and from TAFEs coming onto properties and getting that experience. And I guess likewise with the university, in the research setting, is, you know, having kids going back to what we used to do, work experience. Does anyone do that anymore? Work experience? I did that when I was at high school. So those would be my tips.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Trevor?
Quickly, no, you're not going to take kids back on farms. Occupational health and safety risk of having a 15-year-old running around farm, it's gone. We've got a failed model, which was my father and sister went through, which is the Muresque. We've got an incredibly successful model, which is the university level, and we've got a staggeringly effective model, which is the schools and the ag colleges. And, you know, I think you could double them, and I think that would, and a couple of big ones, north and south in the metro area, would just open up the world.
Okay, Sally, Trevor just answered for you, but you have a go.
Yeah, I can go. I think it's also, you know, picking up on, we've done lots of kind of bitsy projects, one-off things to try and increase careers. What we've never done effectively is the monitoring and evaluation of how impactful have these things been. And I think when we're moving forward, it's the things that we're doing to try and attract young people in. We need to be building that monitoring and evaluation in up front. We need to have a really clear strategy about what we're doing. And I think trying to connect it, like the one thing that I'll give primed is it was an interagency collaboration, and it's the first time I've worked on a project like that across agencies. So being able to work with DPERD, who were sending ambassadors out and getting young people in, because you can't be what you can't see. And I think it's, as awful as this sounds, there's no point a 65-year-old male farmer getting up and talking to a group of young girls. They don't have that connection. So it's about finding role models that they can connect to and helping and giving people a leg up to get in. And I think that's something that everyone can do, everyone wants to do, but how do we do that on scale? When we look at like mining companies where you've only got a couple of big ones, if you get them on board, you've got that critical mass. Farming and agriculture, there's so many little, and even the family farms, even our representative bodies, we don't have one. So it's a lot more complex and a lot more moving parts to get everybody working together. So I guess that's a challenge, but I also think it's an opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Sally. There's an honours project for you, Siddique, evaluation of ag colleges and how successful they've been. Georgia, your comment.
Super quick. Technology is already bringing new people into the industry, and I think if we continue to embrace technology, young people from different pathways and from agricultural digital pathways will continue to look at agriculture as the future role they want to work in.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
I'd run with awareness. So this is about making sure people understand the spectrum of opportunities that are available. Education is always going to be absolutely critical. And then I'll go through, from a people perspective, it's got to be values driven. Respect is always going to be absolutely critical in that diversity inclusion aspect. Adopting technology is always going to attract people, and making sure you've got the right assets for people to operate. And then lastly, it's about embracing sustainability and what comes with it.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
Right. I'll try and be succinct.
Oh, first of all, are you staying in agriculture?
Oh. I was thinking about opening a cafe. No, I'll try and be succinct. The agriculture is a very slow-moving beast. Unlike other industries, we can only really look at things on the ground once a year. Every other industry, ag tech, for example, you can come back tomorrow and you can make massive leaps forward. We've got a handbrake of 12 months on us for whatever we want to do. So with that in mind, being such a slow-moving beast and wanting change, the young people coming through want change. I'll learn from my fellow panel members about controversial opinions. I think a lot of what the young people need is the handbrakes to lead. And there will be time when major change happens, and that's when there is a turnover of people at the helm.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I'd just like to say thank you to all 6 panel members. Thanks for their contribution.
Thank you, panel, very much. So you can take your seat now. I think we had a wonderful discussion. One of the things I just wanted to, it's not in my speech note, when we talk about agriculture student numbers are not there, if you look at the 5 universities in Western Australia, if you take out the international students, the numbers hasn't been growing, including this university for all courses, not just agriculture. So international students are very, very important to bring them on, otherwise these universities will not survive. And inducting them to agriculture is very good. So we have seen the number of students in masters in agriculture science has increased, a number of universities, including here. Internship for them is one of the ways in which exposing them to agriculture. I was an international student, and the exposure I had in agriculture science from this university, and more importantly, my time at the Department of Agriculture has been fantastic. One of my senior colleagues said, you are a pretty good scientist, but you won't be able to address the farmers. That was wrong. Given the chance, we can do it. So the growth in agriculture in this country, in terms of various things, we need to have various approaches. One of them is bringing some bright minds. If you go and look in the mining industry, all those going up and down, many of those engineers are international engineers. Thank you for that. So thank you very much, Belinda. Very well done. Would you please join me in once again thanking Belinda and all of our speakers for sharing their expertise and invaluable insight. Thank you also for all the members of our Industry Advisory Board, CSPP Fertilizers, my team at the UWA Institute of Agriculture, I won't tell the names, student volunteers, and everyone who helped today's event such a success. Should you wish to watch today's presentations again or share your experience with friends or colleagues, the event has been recorded in full and will be shared on your YouTube shortly with the permission of the speakers. We will also be sending out a short post-event survey to all audience members, which I encourage you to participate in, because this is so important for the next year's forum, which will be held around July here in this auditorium. So we have some wonderful events coming. The first one is on 28th of September, Alan Sevier Memorial Lecture by Professor Paul Kinneon from New Zealand. And the next one is 6th October, we have the UWA Farm Ridgefield Biannual Open Day, and it is free, and please do register. And there we will be showcasing number of projects, both research and extension projects on best practice farming system. I finally would like to introduce you to the Farm to Profit project. This is a student. The student is here, Garima. She's looking at develop an optimization model to improve the agri-food supply chain and benefit growers across Australia. Feedback from WA grain growers is essential to achieve this goal, and we would appreciate your help either completing this questionnaire or spreading the word to your farming networks. And this is supported by Grower Group Alliance of West Australia, and also CBH is helping the student. The formal program has now drawn to a close, but the next part is equally exciting, important. I now invite you all to join me for some refreshments and networking outside on the terrace. If you have any further questions, I know there were a lot of questions you would like to ask our panel or want to discuss today's forum over a drink and nibbles. So please join us for the event. Thank you.